Chapter 2446, Destroying the City Lord's Estate, 3. You've actually activated the protective formation cast down by the ancestor of the Guan family. It'll consume quite a lot of energy now that you've activated it. Aren't you overreacting a little, Brother Feiyu? To use the power of the protective formation to kill an early God King is a little over the top, the two envoys from the Gloomwater sect said sternly from behind Guan Feiyu. Clearly, the two envoys did not take Jianchen seriously. However, at this moment, something that shocked the two envoys happened. Jianchen extended a finger towards the sky. A strand of sword chi immediately shot out from his fingertip, surging into the sky like a streak of light with the power of the laws of the sword. When the sword chi collided with the streak of energy from the protective formation, the boom that they expected did not occur. The huge streak of energy was directly cleaved in half by the sword chi, causing energy to scatter in the surroundings. The sword chi did not slow down at all. It continued to rise up in the sky, striking the protective formation of Scarlet Water City heavily with devastating power. Boom! Immediately, a deafening sound exploded in the sky. The entire Scarlet Water City shook violently. The ground trembled like a terrifying earthquake was happening. All the ancient structures standing within the city collapsed. The protective formation over Scarlet Water City was ripped open, and the many crucial points all exploded. In a single moment, the protective formation was completely destroyed, damaged beyond repair. Having personally witnessed this, the eyes of the city lord, Guan Feiyu, widened. He stared straight at the sky. He was shocked. Primordial realm, Guan Feiyu became rather tongue-tied. He stared at Jianchen with an ugly expression as deep fear and a hint of anger filled his eyes. Guan Feiyu swore to himself, since you're a primordial realm expert, couldn't you just expose your strength right from the start? Against a primordial realm expert, he would have never dared to act up. He would try to discuss and negotiate everything. However, this person just happened to hide his strength, causing the originally tiny matter to develop into something like this. Guan Feiyu became even more pained when he thought about the destroyed formation around Scarlet Water City. It was a primordial realm formation. It had been extremely difficult to cast down. Senior, Guan Feiyu said with an ugly expression. However, Jianchen did not give him any time to speak. He extended a finger and produced another powerful strand of sword chi. It struck the defensive formation around the city lord's estate with the pressure of the primordial realm. There were two powerful formations within Scarlet Water City. The first formation was used to protect the entire city. The second formation was around the city lord's estate. The envoys who had fled several thousand kilometers away through secret techniques only felt that they now stood in a sea of sword chi. The sword chi drowned them instantly, turning them into a bloody mist. Before they could even cry out, they were dead. Why? You've actually killed disciples of the Gloomwater sect, Guan Feiyu cried out. The Gloomwater sect was one of the peak sects in the region. Killing a disciple of the Gloomwater sect was not as simple as killing a person from his city lord's estate. At this moment, a surprised cry rang out. A completely naked young man was pulled into the sky under the restraint of an invisible power. He was furious and taken aback. The young man was the young city lord of Scarlet Water City. From his appearance, he was clearly going at it. Jianchen suddenly looked at the young man. In the next moment, the young man produced a chilling cry. He seemed to be in extreme pain as if he was undergoing the most brutal torture in the world. Starting from his feet, his body vanished bit by bit, turning into a bloody rain. It gradually spread to his waist and then to his head. In just a few seconds, the young city lord of Scarlet Water City was dead. He had died to Jianchen's ultimate way of the sword. Just like the two other disciples of the Gloomwater sect, he had not died with a complete body. In the end, Jianchen looked towards the city lord. With a thought, Guan Feiyu directly died. He followed the fate of the three other people. With Jianchen's current level of cultivation, he could control the fates of all people with his ultimate way of the sword. Only primordial realm experts could fend it off. From today onwards, the city lord's estate no longer exists. I give everyone unrelated half a minute to leave. After that time, I will be killing without mercy, Jianchen called out coldly. With that, figures flickered through the ruins. Many dusty soldiers and servants fled as quickly as they could. In half a minute, not a single person alive remained within the ruins of the city lord's estate. Jianchen waved his hand slightly, and a sky full of sword qi immediately descended. It pierced through the ruins like rain. In an instant, the ruins vanish. The entire city lord's estate was gone, leaving not a single pebble behind. Chapter 2447, Threads of Karma. The city lord's estate, a huge structure, had disintegrated under Jianchen's sword qi. The surroundings around the city lord's estate had already become packed. The disturbance there was just too great, so it had alarmed the entire city. All the cultivators with a certain level of strength had gathered around. They stood far away as they blankly stared at the structure that had vanished. They were in emotional turmoil. Not only was the city lord's estate the existence that controlled the entire city, but it was also the representative of the Gloomwater sect established here. It possessed a tremendous background. However, the entire place had actually been flattened. People could not be more shocked right now. Everyone's gaze gathered on the young man in white, fluttering robes. Admiration, shock, fear, and dread all appeared in their eyes. Fang Jingge, you don't need to worry about the people of the city lord's estate causing you any more trouble. Jianchen's face did not change. He remained calm and composed. He turned around and spoke to the young lady behind him. However, Fang Jingge did not seem to hear Jianchen's words. Wide-eyed, she stared straight at the city lord's estate that had been reduced to open ground. Disbelief filled her face. The city lord's estate was an indomitable, holy place in Fang Jingge's eyes. They were the absolute ruler of Scarlet Water City, and no one dared to defy their orders. But now, the godlike city lord's estate had vanished completely right before her. This left Fang Jingge dazed for quite some time. She had never expected that the young senior, who had just bought a crude map from her, was actually a terrifyingly powerful expert. However, at this moment, Jianchen's eyes suddenly narrowed. He stared straight at Fang Jingge. He saw strands and strands of karma on Fang Jingge. Every single thread led off into a different direction. Though this was nothing, karma was everywhere in the world. All cultivators would be bound by karma to a certain degree. However, aside from supreme experts who had reached an exceptional level of cultivation, only those who had comprehended the way of karma could see these threads. Jianchen had comprehended the way of karma from the samsaric immortal exalt in the Neptunian divine palace, so he was able to see these threads. First, he had bought a map from Fang Jingge, and then he saved her from the people of the city lord's estate. Now that he had destroyed the city lord's estate in a single stroke because of what happened with Fang Jingge, there was karma between the two of them. But to Jianchen's surprise, the thread of karma between him and Fang Jingge was extremely thick. From how strong the thread appeared, it seemed to greatly exceed the level of acquaintances. It was thousands of times more than that. Jianchen was stunned and bewildered. Why was his thread of karma with Fang Jingge so strong? Jianchen looked at Fang Jingge deeply. The light in his eyes flickered. He felt uncertain. A while later he said, "Fang Jingge, let's go to see your grandfather." With that, Jianchen waved his hand, and the laws of space permeated his surroundings. He had already vanished with Fang Jingge. He could see Fang Jingge's threads of karma, so he already knew exactly where her grandfather stayed in Scarlet Water City. Sigh. Su Ran sighed gently as she looked in the direction that Jianchen and Fang Jingge had vanished in. Afterwards, she vanished as well. In an extremely quiet place within Scarlet Water City, there was a small stone hut constructed from a messy pile of rocks. It was gloomy inside, and the place had a slight stench. At this moment, the space before the stone hut suddenly pulsed, and Jianchen and Fang Jingge appeared there silently. Only now did Fang Jingge return to her senses. She looked at the stone hut she had lived in for over a decade, and she could not help but cry out. Was she not at the city lord's estate earlier? How had she suddenly returned home? Fang Jingge felt like she was dreaming. "Let's go in and see your grandfather," said Jianchen. His thread of karma with Fang Jingge was so thick, so he began to treat Fang Jingge differently as well. Although he had no idea why his thread of karma with her was so thick, he did understand that his relationship with her was not as simple as mere acquaintances. Fang Jing'er glanced at Jian Chen fearfully. After hesitating slightly, she pushed open the small, damaged, wooden door and entered. The stone hut was very small and very dim. Close to a corner, a pale old man lay on a stone bed powerlessly. The floor beside him was covered with dried blood. The stench came from the blood. Fang Jing'er seemed to have grown accustomed to the stench, so she did not show any disgust at all. She arrived beside the old man as soon as she entered the stone hut, and she showed deep care and sorrow. "Grandfather, grandfather, I'm back," Fang Jing'er called out softly as if she was afraid of scaring the old man by being too loud. The old man's eyelids trembled gently from the voice. Finally, he opened them with great difficulty, revealing a pair of gloomy eyes. Jian Chen stared at the old man. He wanted to see whether his thread of karma with Fang Jing'er was related to the old man or not. However, in the end, he was disappointed. He had no threads of karma with the old man at all. In other words, the old man had nothing to do with him before he had come here. "Jing'er, you're back. You haven't been abused these days you spent outside, right?" said the old man weakly. His eyes were filled with love and shame. Fang Jing'er shook her head. "Grandfather, I've already sold 9 maps this month. I only need to sell 1 more map, and I'll be able to buy a pill for you so that you can live another month. Don't worry, grandfather. I will definitely work hard on selling maps. Once I make enough divine crystals, I'll buy the better pills so that grandfather can completely recover. Let your grandfather ingest this pill. Not only can this pill completely heal your grandfather's wounds, it can also let your grandfather make great progress in his cultivation," said Jian Chen. He passed a thumb-sized pill to Fang Jing'er. "You're actually giving a god-tier pill to a cultivator who's only a saint emperor. You sure are wasteful," Su Ran could not help but mutter from outside the stone hut. "Thank you, senior." Fang Jing'er accepted the pill from Jian Chen in surprise and joy before feeding it to her grandfather excitedly. Immediately, surging energy enveloped the old man. The effects of the god-tier pill kicked in, wrapping around the old man as a faint mist. It'll only take a few seconds for your grandfather to make a complete recovery. However, the pill is very powerful, so the remaining power will increase your grandfather's cultivation. As a result, not only will your grandfather will not awaken immediately after recovering. He'll spend some time cultivating, Jian Chen said to Fang Jing. After a moment of hesitation, he took out a cultivation method and a few cultivation resources from his space ring and passed it to Fang Jing. He said, "From today onwards, don't sell maps anymore. Find a quiet place and cultivate. Only by becoming powerful can you survive in this world." Thank you, senior. I will definitely return senior's kindness in the future. Fang Jing'er teared up in gratitude. Chapter 2448. Ant-like infinite prime. This was all the help that Jian Chen gave Fang Jing'er. Jian Chen did not understand why his threads of karma with Fang Jing'er would be so thick. Before he understood the secrets hidden within the threads of karma, Jian Chen obviously would not nurture Fang Jing'er with everything that he had. Threads of karma could be good and bad. Unfortunately, his comprehension of the way of karma was just too shallow. He did not have a deep understanding, so he was unable to tell if his karma with her was good or bad. As a matter of fact, he could only see Fang Jing'er's threads of karma because her level of cultivation was far too low. If he encountered a cultivator at a higher level, he would not be able to see their threads of karma. The way of karma. Jian Chen muttered inside as he secretly shook his head. Currently, he focused on the way of the sword. He did not have the spare time or effort to devote to the way of karma. He had no idea when he could comprehend the way of karma to a great level. He had comprehended far too many laws right now. Aside from the strongest laws of the sword, there were the laws of creation, laws of destruction, laws of fire, laws of corrosion, laws of curses, laws of strength, and laws of space. He had obtained these 7 laws from the golden core of laws he inherited underground in the desolate plain. Some of them were only at the level of early God King right now, so they were not particularly useful in battle. Moreover, there were the laws of the hallowed and martial soul force. As a result, He did not have sufficient time or energy to increase his other laws right now. After all, the comprehension of every single law required an extremely long amount of time. He had to advance step by step, as there were no shortcuts. An infinite prime is heading over, Su Ran's voice rang out in Jian Chen's head. Jian Chen nodded. He knew that the city lord had crushed a jade talisman before he passed away, so he was already expecting a primordial realm expert to hurry over. This was exactly what he wanted. If he could kill some primordial realm experts here, the resistance he encountered when he went to destroy the Gloomwater sect would lessen. Jian Chen and Su Ran departed silently. They left Scarlet Water City and flew in the direction of the Gloomwater sect. In the end, they stopped 10 million kilometers away from Scarlet Water City. The teleportation formations of Scarlet Water City had been closed down, so people had to pass by this area if they wanted to reach Scarlet Water City from the Gloomwater sect. Around 5 minutes later, an old man shot over from the distance as a blur, heading in the direction of Scarlet Water City. He gave off a tremendous presence. From its strength, he was clearly an infinite prime. Jian Chen hovered in the air with his arms crossed at the same altitude as the old man. He just happened to block the old man's path. "Who are you?" The old man stopped 1,000 meters from Jian Chen. His eyes shone as he stared at Jian Chen with a piercing gaze. "Are you from the Gloomwater sect?" Jian Chen replied emotionlessly with a question. The old man snorted and barked. "I'm Guan Wan, an elder of the Gloomwater sect. Sir, what are your intentions in blocking my path?" As he said that, Guan Wan's senses of the soul flooded out. It instantly reached a range of 10 million kilometers, enveloping the entire Scarlet Water City. Immediately, his face changed drastically. Killing intent surged from him, as he was furious. He called out, "Who is it? Who was the one who destroyed the city lord's estate? I'll crush you to pieces." Suddenly, Guan Wan looked at Jian Chen. His gaze was terrifying as he bellowed, "It's you! It must have been you! You've actually destroyed my Guan family, that's right. It was me. However, with your strength as a second heavenly layer infinite prime, you will probably come nowhere close to crushing me to pieces. Moreover, I haven't come to destroy your Guan family, only the Gloomwater sect," Jian Chen said coldly. He did not take the Guan family seriously at all. With that, Jian Chen struck out decisively. Sword chi radiated from him, and countless strands of them suddenly appeared. They gathered together, immediately enveloping Guan Wan as a blinding cluster of light. Jian Chen comprehended the ultimate way of the sword, the king among the way of the sword. His laws of the sword were so powerful that they had greatly surpassed experts at the same level. He only needed a single thought to condense countless strands of sword chi that would change according to his thoughts. Even though Guan Wan defended as quickly as he could, he was unable to fend off the sword chi that came in from all directions. The barrier he had created with his powers shattered under the sword chi. Even the armor on his body only lasted for a few seconds before becoming riddled with holes. Although Guan Wan was a second heavenly layer infinite prime, he did not possess a god artifact. His strongest armor was only a supreme quality saint artifact. Jian Chen could easily destroy saint artifacts at such a level with his current strength. "Arg!" Guan Wan roared out furiously. He used a secret technique and energy surged from his body. The power of laws enveloped him as well, and he struck out as hard as he could. After dispersing some sword chi, he charged away as quickly as he could. When he emerged from Jian Chen's domain of sword chi, he was in extremely horrible shape. He was covered in various cuts, causing him to bleed everywhere. "Who are you exactly?" Guan Wan's face changed. He became extremely stern as he cried out in fright. In just a single clash, he had been reduced to such horrible shape. The young man's strength was beyond what he could handle. In the next moment, a simple jade talisman appeared in Wan Guan's hand. He wanted to seek help from the sect as quickly as he could. An infinite prime requesting help will probably alarm the chaotic primes. "I can't let you do that." Jian Chen's gaze turned cold. An extremely thin streak of white light flickered on his fingertip. It was a strand of sword chi, an extremely powerful strand of sword chi, condensed from Jian Chen's ultimate way of the sword. Even though it seemed nothing special, it was powerful enough to surprise mid-infinite primes. The strand of sword chi flashed, and in the next moment, Guan Wan grunted painfully. Wan Guan's wrist, connected to the hand that held the jade talisman, spurted with blood. His hand had been cut off. Before he could crush the jade talisman, it fell towards the ground. Die! Jian Chen's eyes were cold. He suddenly extended a finger towards Wan Guan, and the space there trembled slightly. A finger-sized hole silently appeared between Wan Guan's eyes. His head had been pierced, and his soul had shattered. He was dead. A second heavenly layer infinite prime had died to Jian Chen's hands just like that, slain effortlessly. Jian Chen did not feel any particular emotion. With a flash, he arrived beside Guan Wan and removed his space ring before stowing away his corpse as well. The corpses of primordial realm experts were extremely precious to Jian Chen right now. They were the best nourishment for the immortal devouring orchid. Chapter 2449. Point Cloud takes action. The immortal devouring orchid resided within a divine hall that Jian Chen carried around. Through devouring the corpses of god kings, its strength constantly rose. However, since the orchid was far too weak, it would take a very long time to digest even the corpse of a god king completely. However, as its strength constantly increased, its speed at devouring corpses became faster and faster. I've already enveloped this region with a technique of mine, isolating this space from the outside world. As a result, the disturbance from your battle with Guan Wan should not have been sensed by the chaotic primes of the Gloomwater sect. Let's go to the Gloomwater sect. Su Ran appeared and said to Jian Chen. Jian Chen nodded before flying towards the Gloomwater sect quietly. Very soon, Jian Chen arrived at an ancient mountain range abundant in origin energy. Mist shrouded the entire place. It was a beautiful landscape, like a land that belonged to immortals. This was where the Gloomwater sect stood. Jian Chen and Su Ran concealed their presence as they approached the establishment in the mountain range silently. The two of them could clearly see a great formation hidden within the deep mist. The formation was extremely powerful. Even with Jian Chen's strength, it was impossible to destroy it even if he unleashed everything he had. He would not even be able to shake it up. This formation is very powerful. I think even first heavenly layer grand primes can't do anything about it. There's nothing that I can do. Su Ran looked at the protective formation over the Gloomwater sect and frowned. She had learnt many secret techniques of the heavenly palace of Bisheng from her master, which happened to include techniques that could destroy formations. However, once the level of the formation exceeded her strength completely, she would be powerless as well. Jian Chen, allow me to destroy the Gloomwater sect's protective formation. You go destroy the Gloomwater sect without worry. I will speak to the other sects on the aqua plane for you. They won't interfere. At this moment, an old voice rang out in Jian Chen's head. Jian Chen could recognize the voice. It belonged to Point Cloud Venerable of the 5-Point sect. Before Jian Chen could agree, the Point Cloud Venerable had already taken action. The time in the ancient mountain range suddenly stopped. Everything came to a standstill. Whether it be the vegetation there or the curling mist, they all froze at that moment. The entire beautiful world seemed to become a painting, frozen like that for eternity. Even the protective formation of the Gloomwater sect was affected. The tremendous energy that constantly circulated in the formations suddenly froze. The entire formation became absolutely silent. It's the laws of time, Su Ran said from beside Jian Chen. The Point Cloud Venerable had already comprehended the laws of time to an extremely profound level, so even the protective formation of the Gloomwater sect was unable to resist it. Under the influence of the laws of time, the protective formation was unable to replenish its energy, so its defenses dropped to a minimum. Right at this moment, the space above the protective formation pulsed. A huge, crescent spatial blade fell down and landed on the protective formation. Under the influence of the laws of time, the protective formation's defenses had been drastically weakened. Now that it was struck by the spatial blade, it immediately shattered. In the blink of an eye, The Gloomwater sect's protective formation had been destroyed by the Point Cloud Venerable. As soon as the formation was destroyed, the frozen time returned to normal. The grass there began to sway in the gentle breeze again. It seemed like nothing had happened at all. The only difference now was that the Gloomwater sect that had been hidden in the protective formation was now completely exposed. The combination of the laws of time and the laws of space really do have unbelievable effects. He hasn't touched a single blade of grass here. Su Ran could not help but cry out. It said that the Point Cloud Venerable once received the guidance of the Space-Time Elder. His usage of the laws of space and laws of time was probably inspired by the Space-Time Elder. All the people of the Gloomwater sect have been alarmed, and the chaotic primes have all appeared. The range of the 9 Tribulations incineration formation is limited, so I need to use this time to envelope all the chaotic primes. Su Ran took out the 9 Tribulations incineration formation and fused with space silently, infiltrating the Gloomwater sect. At the same time, a great bell boomed through the Gloomwater sect, throwing the entire place into a mess. The sudden shattering of the protective formation made the Gloomwater sect ring their bell of warning. All the experts who were cultivating in seclusion emerged and gathered at the entrance of the sect as quickly as they could. There was a discussion hall near the entrance of the sect. 5 figures appeared silently above the discussion hall as they gave off terrifying, tremendous presences. The 5 of them were the great elders of the Gloomwater sect. They were all chaotic primes. The 5 great leaders looked at the sky with ugly expressions. They were extremely stern. There's no other person who has comprehended the laws of space and the laws of time to such a level aside from the Point Cloud Venerable of the 5-Point sect. Point Cloud Venerable, our ancestor has made several deals with you in the past. Although you're not exactly friends, you do know each other. May I ask what your intentions are with what you just did? Bellowed a great elder furiously from within the Gloomwater sect. He was the leader of the great elders, Yi Chong, the 9th heavenly layer chaotic prime. He was the existence only second to the elder of mountains and seas in the Gloomwater sect. However, at this moment, Yi Chong's face changed. He called out, "Oh no! Disperse!" Before he had even finished speaking, Yi Chong vanished. He appeared several dozen kilometers away. He had reacted extremely quickly, but the 4 other chaotic primes were a split second slower. That split second decided their fates. A formation silently expanded and enveloped the 4 of them. Perfect! Su Ran muttered inside. The strongest person had not fallen into the formation, while the weaker 4 did. It was a perfect scenario. The 9 Tribulations incineration formation's power would weaken drastically if it had to deal with 5 chaotic primes at the same time, as the attacks would be scattered. Once the 5 of them worked together, it would be rather difficult for her to deal with them. Now that the strongest chaotic prime had not fallen into the formation, the power was directed to the 4 people who were inside it. Every single one of them would have to endure more power from the formation. Without the 9th heavenly layer chaotic prime, Su Ran would be able to deal with them without too much difficulty even if the 4 of them worked together. State your identities. Yi Chong bellowed furiously in the Gloomwater sect. Killing intent surged from him as laws condensed around him. He held a great blade and swung it towards Su Ran. The huge blade was a medium-quality god artifact. It was extremely powerful. The blade shone brilliantly as a devastating power pulsed, seemingly cutting the world in half. It headed directly for Su Ran. Kill him! In the instant that Yi Chong attacked, Jian Chen took out the jade talisman the Myriad Bone Guild had given him outside the Gloomwater sect. After activating the talisman, he pointed at Yi Chong. Chapter 2450. The Heartless Child. Originally, they had prepared this attack from the Myriad Bone Guild for the Elder of Mountains and Seas. Now that he was dead, Jian Chen could only use it to kill the 9th heavenly layer chaotic prime. Su Ran became extremely stern as she received Yi Chong's attack within the Gloomwater sect, but she did not become flustered at all. Even though she was not as powerful as Yi Chong, she was not weak to the point where she could not fight back. With her various secret techniques, she could dodge the attack easily. However, just when Su Ran wanted to move, the space before her suddenly was ripped open. A small hand suddenly reached out and pressed forward. With that, space and laws collapsed. Yi Chang's devastatingly powerful attack directly dispersed, reduced to nothingness. That was not all. Even Yi Chong, who dealt that attack, suddenly showed extreme fear. His eyes were filled with deep dread, and with a loud boom, he exploded into a bloody mist. The 9th heavenly layer chaotic prime Yi Chong had died. Su Ran's eyes suddenly narrowed when she witnessed this. Shock filled her face as she suddenly looked towards the small hand. Yi Chong was a mighty 9th heavenly layer chaotic prime. He was only a step away from becoming a peak expert and a grand prime. Even if a 1st heavenly layer grand prime wanted to kill someone like that, they would need to expend some effort. However, Yi Chong actually seemed as insignificant as an ant before the thin and short arm. He could not even escape and was easily killed off. This shocked Su Ran. She was astounded. This is definitely not an attack from a 1st heavenly layer grand prime. Su Ran cried out inside. The light in her eyes flickered as she stared at the small arm that had extended out from the spatial crack. But very soon she seemed to understand something. She returned to normal and focused on controlling the 9 tribulations incineration formation against the remaining 4 great elders of the Gloomwater sect. Outside the Gloomwater sect, Jianchen had also become absolutely astounded by Yi Chang's death. He stared straight at the small arm. Currently he was shocked. It's actually him. Jianchen could already guess who the person from the Myriad Bone Guild was from the arm. He was the young child they had seen in the Prosper Plain branch of the Bone Myriad Guild. The battle prowess of this great elder is extraordinary. Although regular 1st heavenly layer grand primes can defeat him, if he wants to escape, even they won't be able to make him stay. Jianchen, my strike has surpassed the level of a 1st heavenly layer grand prime. You got the better end of the deal this time. At this moment, the child's voice rang out in Jianchen's head. The voice still seemed rather childish, just like a young child's voice. However, Jianchen no longer dared to underestimate the boy. Thank you, senior. Jianchen clasped his fist at the space there before charging into the Gloomwater sect with a flash. The death of their strongest great elder, Yi Chong, had heavily shaken up the disciples of the Gloomwater sect. Many regular disciples became utterly terrified, losing their morale and scattering in all directions. The entire Gloomwater sect became even messier with Yi Chang's death. The people exist with the clan. The people die with the clan. Do not flee, disciples of the Gloomwater sect. Stay behind with the clan. All deserters will be treated as traitors of the sect and will be slain without mercy. A 9th heavenly layer infinite prime elder called out from the Gloomwater sect. He personally took action and killed a few fleeing disciples on the spot. The 9th heavenly layer infinite prime clearly had some prestige in the Gloomwater sect. As soon as he said that, all the elders of the sect made up their minds. Resolution flooded their faces, and they struck out decisively, killing off all the deserting disciples. The firmness and viciousness of the elders immediately frightened all the disciples of the sect. No one dared to run anymore. All the disciples, regardless of strength, remained behind, falling into formation to resist the intruders. Even more infinite prime elders used their full strength to attack the 9 tribulations incineration formation to try and free the 4 great elders trapped inside. The 4 great elders in the 9 tribulations incineration formation had already begun working together. They endured the soul attacks from the formation as they used their full strength to attack the formation. The 9 tribulations incineration formation specially targeted the soul. It was very difficult to defend against its attacks, so the longer the great elders were trapped in there, the worse it would become for them. As a result, they all did their best to break out. Su Ran was busy controlling the formation to keep the 4 great elders trapped, so there was nothing she could do about the infinite prime elders outside. Immediately, the 9 tribulations incineration formation began to tremble violently from the attacks from both inside and outside. At this moment, a streak of light shot over. It possessed earth-shaking might and cut the head of a 1st heavenly layer infinite prime in half on the spot, killing him off. Jianchen flew into the Gloomwater sect. He wielded the 9-star sword of heavenly ways as sword chi wrapped around him. His presence was extremely astonishing. With a single strike, countless strands of sword chi gathered over. Starlight flickered resplendently as he engaged in a battle against the infinite primes of the Gloomwater sect aggressively. Jianchen did not hold back at all in the fight this time. He had already drawn his 9-star sword of heavenly ways, borrowing its power to elevate his battle prowess once again. He had completely reached the level of 6th heavenly layer infinite primes. He blocked all the infinite primes of the Gloomwater sect alone. The 9-star sword of heavenly ways. You're Jianchen. A few elders recognized Jianchen from the 9-star sword of heavenly ways, and they immediately cried out. At the same time, many powerful senses of the souls swept over on the aquaplane, revolving about in the sky above the Gloomwater sect. The battle in the Gloomwater sect had caused too great of a disturbance. It had already alarmed all the peak experts on the aquaplane. Isn't that the 9-star sword of heavenly ways? Jianchen has actually come to the aquaplane. It's just a pity that the Aneta Tower has already been returned to the heavenly palace of Bishing. Jianchen no longer holds any value. The peak experts recognized Jianchen immediately, and they all sighed. If the Aneta Tower was still on Jianchen, the peak experts on the aquaplane would definitely fight over it. However, since the Aneta Tower had already been returned to the heavenly palace of Bishing, they naturally lost all interest in him. Just as Jianchen clashed with the experts of the Gloomwater sect, the child that Jianchen saw in the Myriad Bone Guild hovered in outer space silently. No one on the aquaplane discovered his existence. Heartless child, you've actually personally killed a chaotic prime. Isn't that degrading your identity? A calm voice rang out at this moment. A middle-aged man silently appeared near the child. The child turned around and stared at the middle-aged man for a while before sniggering, 9 brilliant Star Lord, this isn't your Star Brilliance plane. Me killing someone on the aquaplane doesn't seem to have anything to do with you. Moreover, I've taken action this time because of a deal I had with Jianchen. I think you're more than certain as to what our Myriad Bone Guild does. The middle-aged man was the supreme figure of the Star Brilliance plane, the Star Brilliance Star Lord. However, the child did not show any dread or fear before an expert like the 9 brilliant Star Lord. He seemed extremely composed. Chapter 2451. The Wind Venerable the 9 Brilliance Star Lord did not care about the child's attitude. He stared at the heartless child of the Myriad Bone Guild calmly and said, even if it's a deal between your Myriad Bone Guild and Jianchen, you only need to send a regular Grand Prime to complete something like this. Why would there be a need for the figure that ranks second in the Myriad Bone Guild to take personal action? Moreover, against a junior who's only a chaotic prime? The heartless child snickered when he heard that and replied, 9 brilliant Star Lord, there's no need for you to concern yourself over who I kill. The 9 brilliant Star Lord stared at the heartless child deeply. After a moment of thought, he suddenly extended a finger gently. Immediately, resplendent starlight appeared, enveloping him and the heartless child with a colorful screen of light. The screen of light seemed to create a world of its own, distorting the ways and making the laws incomplete. It was completely independent from the outside world. The heartless child watched this happen calmly. He did not show any surprise at all and remained composed. You've used your way of stars to isolate the region and turn it into your own domain, pushing out the laws of the saints' world. You're obscuring the heavenly secrets. 9 brilliant Star Lord, it seems like something's bothering you, the heartless child said indifferently as his eyes shone. The 9 brilliant Star Lord was stern and did not deny it. You're right. There is indeed something bothering me. Heartless child, if I've guessed correctly, you're helping Jianchen because you want to establish ties with the heavenly palace of Bishing through him. The heartless child was calm. He sat down and said, you're right. I do plan on doing something like that. The greatest threat of our Myriad Bone Guild is right before us. If we can't survive this threat, our Myriad Bone Guild will vanish from the Saints' world permanently, and Jianchen might be the crucial figure who can assist our Myriad Bone Guild in surviving this threat. The 9 brilliant Star Lord sank into his thoughts momentarily. He nodded and said, over 3 million years ago, the Spirit Sages suffered heavy losses after the war with the Immortals' world. Even their greatest expert, the Wind Venerable, went missing after that war. In the past, the leader of your Myriad Bone Guild believed the Wind Venerable was dead, so he mobilized all the power of the Myriad Bone Guild to launch a large-scale attack on the Spirit Sages while they were at their weakest in an attempt to steal their ancestral artifact. As the Spirit Sages had lost the Wind Venerable, they no longer possessed an expert who could hold off you and the leader of the Myriad Bone Guild. In the end, the Spirit Sages suffered extremely heavy losses, and even their sacred item, the Holy Spirit's blood, ended up in the hands of your Myriad Bone Guild. If it were not for the Spirit Sages activating the power of their ancestral artifact at a crucial moment, they probably would have gone extinct aside from the Wind Venerable. When he reached there, the 9 Brilliant Star Lord shook his head. It's just a pity that the Spirit Sage's ancestral artifact's greatest ability was to protect, so it could only prevent the Spirit Sages from going extinct. It could do nothing to your Myriad Bone Guild. The heartless child's face became rather sunken. He said sternly, "It was our miscalculation. We underestimated the Wind Venerable's strength. We never thought he would be able to survive against the grand exalt of the ancient and profound from the immortals' world. It's just a pity that our Myriad Bone Guild mobilized all our power and searched for him for over 1,000,000 years, but we still failed to find where he was hiding. We lost our greatest chance of killing the Wind Venerable. So much time has passed now, so the Wind Venerable should have recovered from most of his wounds now. Killing him will become more and more difficult. Once he fully recovers, it'll be a disaster for our Myriad Bone Guild." When he reached there, the heartless child showed deep fear in his eyes. He said sternly, "The Wind Venerable is far too powerful. Although he and my brother are both 9th Heavenly Layer Grand Primes, even if I work with my brother, we're still not his opponent." The 9 Brilliant Star Lord could not help but break into laughter when he heard that. If you work with the leader of the Myriad Bone Guild, you're equivalent to a dark gold ape king of the ancient great apes at most. You might even be less than that. On the other hand, the Wind Venerable fighting alone killed 2 dark gold ape kings consecutively in the past. It's exactly because of that our Myriad Bone Guild is searching for a way to deal with the Wind Venerable. My brother once peered into the heavenly secrets, and although he failed to find where the Wind Venerable was hiding, he saw that the Wind Venerable would appear soon. "He must have fully recovered now," said the heartless child. "Heartless child, I would advise you to not waste your energy on trying to establish ties with the heavenly palace of Bisheng through Jianqin," the 9 Brilliant Star Lord said suddenly as the light in his eyes flickered. The heartless child's eyes narrowed. He stared right at the 9 Brilliant Star Lord and said, "Your master's a sovereign of the saints' world, so you must know that the Enata Grand Exalt isn't really dead. The Enata Grand Exalt allowed Jianqin to carry the Enata Tower, which means that there must be an unknown relationship between him and the Enata Grand Exalt. As long as the Enata Grand Exalt stands on our side, even if the Wind Venerable of the Spirit Sages becomes a Grand Exalt, he won't be able to touch our Myriad Bone Guild." The 9-Star Brilliance Lord's lips curled into a sneer when he heard that. "Heartless child, the way you think about everything is too simple. However, there's one point that you are correct about. There is an unknown secret between Jianqin and the Enata Grand Exalt. I learnt about this secret from my master. Jianqin is actually the Enata Grand Exalt's fruit of ways. He's a tool for the Enata Grand Exalt to comprehend the ways. Once he's ripe, the Enata Grand Exalt will harvest him. At that time, Jianqin's fate will be dying at the Enata Grand Exalt's hands, so you're dreaming if you plan on establishing ties with the heavenly palace of Bisheng through Jianqin. What did you say? Jianqin is the Enata Grand Exalt's fruit of ways?" The heartless child was astounded. The 9 Brilliant Star Lord nodded, "And I have something else to tell you. The Wind Venerable of the Spirit Sages actually recovered many years ago. The reason why he still hasn't appeared is because he has reached an extremely critical juncture in his cultivation. He's no longer in a state where he can care about others." The heartless child's face immediately changed, and he became extremely solemn. "This is the Wind Venerable's location. Under the rules of your Myriad Bone Guild, I should be able to request a large amount of treasures from you in return for it, but I'll give it to you for free. If it's possible, I don't wish for the Wind Venerable to survive either because he's just too powerful." The 9 Brilliant Star Lord extended a finger, and a speck of starlight immediately shot into the heartless child's hand. Afterwards, he vanished, having departed from there. The heartless child glanced at the chart in his hand before looking at Jianchen, who was fighting many primordial realm experts on the aquaplane. I never thought about that. I really never thought about it. Never did I think that you would be the fruit of ways for the Anata Grand Exalt. Fruit of ways, fruit of ways. This is just too perfect. The heartless child's seriousness vanished, replaced by a strange smile. He clenched his hands slightly, and the star chart that recorded the Wind Venerable's location shattered. 9 Brilliant Star Lord, do you really think that our Myriad Bone Guild doesn't know about the Wind Venerable's situation? The Wind Venerable is the greatest, looming disaster of our Myriad Bone Guild, so we would obviously do everything we can to find him. In reality, we've already located him. We know his situation much better than you. It's just a pity that he's far too powerful. Even if he has lost his mind and gone insane, we still can't deal with him. Chapter 2452. Massacring Primordial Realm Experts. The heartless child looked at Jianchen again. A strange light flickered in his eyes as he thought, however, I need my brother to learn about Jianchen being the Anata Grand Exalt's fruit of ways, and then we can come up with a countermeasure. With that, the heartless child vanished. He had also departed, no longer paying attention to Jianchen. The Gloomwater sect had already descended into a huge battle on the aquaplane. Su Ran used the 9 Tribulations incineration formation to keep the 4 chaotic primes of the Gloomwater sect trapped. She maintained the formation to the best of her ability to hold the 4 of them off. As for Jianchen, he wielded the 9-star sword of heavenly ways outside the 9 Tribulations incineration formation and kept all the other primordial realm experts from the Gloomwater sect busy. He prevented them from working together to attack the 9 Tribulations incineration formation. Even though there were 40 to 50 infinite prime elders in the Gloomwater sect, they failed to gain the upper hand at all when they worked together against Jianchen. Instead, they seemed to be suppressed by him. Jianchen's battle prowess was just too powerful. When he did not use the 9-star sword of heavenly ways, his battle prowess was already equivalent to a 6th heavenly layer infinite prime. Only 7 of their elders could match Jianchen. Even the weakest of these 7 was a 6th heavenly layer infinite prime. However, probably only the 3 late infinite prime elders were capable of defeating Jianchen. But now, Jianchen wielded the 9-star sword of heavenly ways. With a god artifact in hand, his battle prowess rose once again. He had completely surpassed the level of the 6th heavenly layer of infinite prime. Among all the elders of the Gloomwater sect, only the 9th heavenly layer infinite prime could keep him suppressed. However, Jianchen avoided the 9th heavenly layer infinite prime. He wielded the 9-star sword of heavenly ways as sword chi wrapped around him. He killed his way through the crowd with surging sword intent. He especially targeted the weaker elders. Spurt! Spurt! Blood sprayed into the sky above the Gloomwater sect. Every droplet of blood contained rather powerful pulses of energy, scattering in the air like blooming flowers before raining down. Jianchen was unstoppable as he triumphantly killed his way around the encirclement formed by the elders. In just a short moment, 5 elders had died to his 9-star sword of heavenly ways. Without any exception, these elders were all early infinite primes. With their strength, it was basically impossible for them to put up any resistance against Jianchen. Suddenly, a cage completely created from fire appeared in the sky. With the might of a god-tier battle skill, it enveloped Jianchen. This attack came from a 5th heavenly layer infinite prime. He comprehended the laws of fire and had used a god-tier battle skill against Jianchen. The god-tier battle skill was so powerful that it even posed a fatal threat to 6th heavenly layer infinite primes, but it was nothing to Jianchen. The 9-star sword of heavenly ways in his hand shone with dazzling light. He directly slashed out as it glowed like a star. Boom! With a deafening sound, the cage of fire shattered from Jianchen's attack. The god-tier battle skill was nullified by a single attack of his. Jianchen's hair fluttered about as his presence surged. He endured the terrifying heat fearlessly as he shot through the fire like a sword. The 9-star sword of heavenly ways shone brightly as he directly stabbed it towards the elder who had used the god-tier battle skill. Even though the elder was a 5th heavenly layer infinite prime, his expression could not help but change when he faced Jian Chen's attack. He swung his right hand, and a round shield silently appeared. It stood before him with the might of a god artifact. The round shield happened to be a low-quality god artifact. Jian Chen's 9-star sword of heavenly ways shone with starlight as it landed on the round shield with devastating power and the laws of strength. Under the amplification of the laws of strength, not only was Jian Chen's attack astonishing, but the force hidden within it was extraordinarily terrifying as well. The primordial realm expert who blocked Jian Chen's attack with the round shield suddenly felt extreme pain in his right hand before losing all senses in it. The round shield was a god artifact, so it emerged unharmed from the attack. However, the primordial realm elder's arm had been crushed by the terrifying power. Jian Chen's attack was just too great. Even if the elder blocked his attack with a god artifact, the elder was unable to defend against all of it. Suddenly, there was a flash of resplendent starlight. Jian Chen stabbed out a second time. He used the laws of space with this strike, so it seemed to break free from the limitations of space. It moved with unbelievable speed, arriving before the 5th heavenly layer infinite prime almost instantly. Then Elder's face suddenly changed, and his pupils shrank to the size of pin tips. He felt the space around him lock up as he faced the attack. He was under the illusion that he could not dodge. It was as if he could only take the attack head-on. However, when Jian Chen stabbed out, the space around him tightened as well. Terrifying power gathered behind him. A skinny hand struck towards Jian Chen's back with surging power and laws. Space shook wherever the hand passed by. This was the strongest elder of the Gloomwater sect, a 9th heavenly layer infinite prime. When Jian Chen struck out to deal with the 5th heavenly layer infinite prime, the greatest elder of the Gloomwater sect also took advantage of the situation and struck out. His action was basically an attempt to save people by attacking. If Jian Chen insisted on attacking the 5th heavenly layer infinite prime, he would not be able to dodge the palm strike from behind him. The palm strike contained the power of a peak infinite prime. Any expert below the 7th heavenly layer of infinite prime would end up either dead or heavily injured if they took on the attack. Moreover, the other elders in the surroundings all attacked Jian Chen at the same time. Over a dozen attacks locked onto Jian Chen and shot over. However, the 9th heavenly layer infinite prime had miscalculated. Jian Chen did not try to dodge his palm strike at all, allowing it to land on his back. The 9-star sword of heavenly ways did not slow down either, stabbing the 5th layer infinite prime between the eyes firmly. A 5th heavenly layer infinite prime died immediately. Bang! At the same time, heavy thuds rang out. Jian Chen endured over a dozen attacks when he killed the 5th heavenly layer infinite prime. Among them, the most powerful attack happened to be the palm strike from the 9th heavenly layer infinite prime. Immediately, energy surged high in the air. A pulse of energy turned into a destructive storm and scattered in the surroundings, reducing the mountains and rivers below into a mess. Jian Chen was sent flying. His clothes were reduced to tatters, and he was covered with blood. Chapter 2453, Destroying the Sect, 1. Of course, the blood was not his. It belonged to the elders of the Gloomwater sect. Over a dozen attacks from primordial realm experts failed to leave any severe wounds on Jian Chen. They only left behind a few injuries that were not particularly deep. That's right, only a few injuries. Some of the attacks did not possess enough power. Although they were also at the primordial realm, they were not strong enough to get through the defense of the chaotic body, so they failed to even scratch him. Jian Chen's chaotic body was just too tough. If the attacks from some primordial realm experts were not powerful enough, they would completely fail to harm him. Only the palm strike from the 9th heavenly layer infinite prime had wounded Jian Chen. A red mark appeared where the hand had struck Jian Chen on the back. It was a bloody mess. Moreover, a powerful energy invaded Jian Chen's body. The energy was so powerful that even his chaotic body was unable to endure it. It shook up all his organs as his blood and flesh surged. Jian Chen quietly circulated chaotic force. Immediately, strands of turbulent chaotic force surged out from his chaotic Niden, raging through his body like a river. Jian Chen's wounds recovered rapidly. In just a few short seconds, the wounds that were not particularly severe began to heal at a visible rate. What a tough body! The strongest elder could not help but cry out as he stared at the dissatisfying injury on Jian Chen's back. He became stern. But afterwards he discovered that Jian Chen's wounds were actually healing at a visible rate, which made him gasp uncontrollably. At the same time, his eyes narrowed. How is this possible? The other elders discovered this as well. They were all tongue-tied, and it was like they had just seen a ghost. So many of their attacks had struck Jian Chen at the same time, but they did nothing severe to him at all. This affected them. At the same time, powerful senses of the souls intermingled in the air above the Gloomwater sect. When they came in contact with one another, a discussion only they could hear happened as well. Jian Chen's body really is tough. This child's strength grows far too quickly. When the Neptunian Divine Palace opened last time, Jian Chen was only a God King. He had even been chased around by a few kids from the God King's throne. But in the end, after such a short amount of time, he became powerful enough to easily kill infinite primes. The major reason why his battle prowess is so great is because of the laws of the sword that he has comprehended. His laws of the sword are far too powerful. It has completely surpassed all other experts who have comprehended the laws of the sword to the same level. Just the laws of the sword would not have been enough for him to become this powerful. There's also his cultivation method and the power that he uses. The experts who hid on the aquaplane discussed about Jian Chen with some interest. What Jian Chen cultivates seems to be the chaotic body. At this moment, a powerful senses of the soul spoke. It really does seem to be the chaotic body. The battle prowess of the chaotic body is indeed invincible among the same level of cultivation. However, those who practice this cultivation method are fated to never reach the peak. Their future accomplishments will be limited. Moreover, raising someone with a chaotic body requires tremendous amounts of resources. It's just not worth it. That's exactly why cultivators of the chaotic body are basically mythical existence in our saints' world. However, I have heard that there seem to be more people who cultivate the chaotic body in the immortals' world. Jian Chen, just what grievances does our Gloomwater sect have with you? Why must you destroy us? Called out the greatest elder of the Gloomwater sect angrily. Only now did he truly understand just how difficult Jian Chen was to deal with. If Jian Chen was just powerful, he could suppress him with his personal strength. However, the toughness of Jian Chen's body was like a deviance as well. This pressured the greatest elder of the Gloomwater sect. Although he could suppress Jian Chen with his strength, he had no confidence about killing Jian Chen given the latter's tough body. The elder of mountains and seas of your Gloomwater sect killed a close friend of mine. Do you think that's a grievance? Said Jian Chen coldly as he stood with his sword. When he thought about the already dead Kaya, his killing intent surged. With that, he turned into a streak of light and shot off towards an elder. It's actually problems caused by the ancestor, the greatest elder of the Gloomwater sect sighed inside. After learning the reason, he understood that their grievances had reached the point of no return. He immediately ordered, all elders fall into battle formation to attack the formation and free the great elders with the God King disciples. I'll keep Jian Chen busy. With that, the elder appeared before Jian Chen in a flash. Terrifying energy erupted from his body as he attacked Jian Chen with his full strength. He did not want to kill Jian Chen. He only wished to keep him busy so that Jian Chen could not target the other elders. When the strongest elder took action, the other elders all dispersed and traveled far away from Jian Chen. After that, they gathered together several dozen kilometers away. They were preparing a battle formation. Many God King disciples of the Gloomwater sect rapidly gathered below them. Power surged from them. They were about to cooperate with the elders to attack the 9 Tribulations incineration formation. Do you think that the disciples of your Gloomwater sect will be able to destroy the 9 Tribulations incineration formation without any worries just because you're keeping me busy? Jian Chen said coldly. Suddenly, a dazzling light shot out from his eyes, hiding a sharp, overbearing sword intent. He expanded his will from the ultimate way of the sword and enveloped a region of 100,000 kilometers in a single moment. The space seemed to become an independent domain, and Jian Chen stood as the supreme ruler in there. Here, everything was within his grasps, and he could decide the fates of people with a single thought. Bang, bang, bang. With a series of explosions, the several hundred god kings of the Gloomwater sect all exploded. None of them could even emit a cry before they were turned into a bloody mist and killed off. Afterwards, all of their blood gathered over under a mysterious power before forming a blood-red sword that stood thousands of meters long in the end. The sword was forged from the blood of several hundred god kings, so it hid powerful pulses of energy. Afterwards, under the shocked gazes of the several dozen elders, the sword directly shot into the sky with devastating power. It contained the power from the blood of several hundred god kings and Jian Chen's sword intent from the ultimate way of the sword. Chapter 2454. Destroying the Sect. 2. The deaths of several hundred god kings and the formation of the huge sword happened within a split second. It was so fast that all the infinite primes remained stunned over the major change in the situation. The blood-red sword charged into the sky. It moved extremely quickly. With the resplendent flash, it had already shot past the closest infinite prime elder. Immediately, blood splashed in the sky. Even though the sword was completely condensed from blood, its sharpness was astonishing. The infinite prime had been directly cut into two and killed off by the sword. After killing an elder, the huge sword did not slow down at all. Under Jian Chen's control, it shot towards a second elder. His targets were the weakest among the group of elders because the weaker ones were easier to kill. If he challenged the 6th heavenly layer or 7th heavenly layer elders right from the start, it would be difficult to kill them in a single stroke. Jian Chen clearly wanted to reduce the number of primordial realm experts as quickly as he could. Spurt, spurt, spurt. After killing the first elder, the blood-red sword turned into a blur and shot through a second and third elder with extremely great speed. In the end, the sword condensed from the blood of god kings was stopped by a 6th heavenly layer elder after killing 4 primordial realm elders. At the same time, as Jian Chen was distracted, he ended up heavily injured. The greatest elder of the Gloomwater sect condensed powerful pulses of energy and formed chains with the power of laws on his hands. He struck them towards Jian Chen with devastating power. He wore a set of gloves on his hands. They were forged from the leather of divine beasts, giving off the might of god artifacts. The set of gloves happened to be low-quality god artifacts. The greatest elder of the Gloomwater sect was already extremely powerful. Coupled with a god artifact, his attacks became even more terrifying. As a result, Jian Chen's organs were shaken to pieces from the attacks. A fist-sized hole had even appeared in his chest. It was a bloody mess, and all his ribs had shattered. If some other primordial realm experts suffered such heavy injuries, their battle prowess would definitely be affected. However, the greatest advantage with Jian Chen's chaotic body was not the supreme regeneration or destructiveness that outshone all energies of the same level, but his tough body. With the support of the chaotic body, Jian Chen's battle prowess would remain unaffected even if he were heavily injured. Instead, he seemed to become a vicious beast. After getting injured, he grew even more ferocious. He fought braver and braver. Jian Chen bellowed out at the sky, shaking up the mountain range. With a single thought, the blood-red sword stopped by the 6th heavenly layer elder immediately exploded. It shot off in all directions like torrential rain. The blood was not as simple as the blood of god kings. Every single droplet contained powerful, sharp sword chi. All of the blood possessed the power from Jian Chen's ultimate way of the sword. In the end, the might within each droplet of blood was enough to make infinite primes pale. The countless droplets of blood filling the sky did not shoot off blindly. Under Jian Chen's control, they divided into over 30 portions, shooting towards the remaining primordial realm elders evenly. All the elders became flustered. They all unleashed various techniques and abilities to block the blood. However, they were no longer able to focus on falling into formation against the 9 tribulations incineration formation anymore now that they were under attack. At the same time, stars were conjured from the 9-star sword of heavenly ways in Jian Chen's hand. He blocked the greatest elder's attack. "Jian Chen, I swear I will tear you to pieces." The greatest elder bellowed out furiously as he struck out even more violently. The deaths of several hundred god kings left him devastated. They formed the majority of the Gloomwater sect's forces. They were the future of the Gloomwater sect, but they were all dead now. The elders from the Gloomwater sect were no longer in the mood to consider how Jian Chen had killed so many god kings, but the powerful senses of the souls that moved through the sky above the Gloomwater sect all cried out. He actually killed so many god kings with a single thought. What is this ancient secret technique? Why is it so terrifying? I've lived for over 10 million years, but I've never seen or heard of such a powerful ability. I can vaguely sense that this ability seems to come from the very basics of the laws of the sword that Jian Chen comprehends. With Jian Chen's current level of cultivation, it's probably impossible for him to comprehend it through his own abilities. I think he obtained the legacy of some powerful person who wields the laws of the sword. Someone powerful who wields the laws of the sword? There are extremely few people like that in our saints' world. The person who appeared most recently is Swordmaster Yun Qi from 10 million years ago. He was only a step away from challenging sovereigns of the world during his peak, but unfortunately, he was slain under the combined efforts of the 2 dark gold ape kings of the ancient great apes. What a pity, what a pity! Jian Chen's appearance might lead to another expert who wields the laws of the sword in the future of our saints' world. At this moment, there was a flash, and Jian Chen gave up on his battle against the greatest elder. He bathed in light as he charged towards the weaker elders aggressively. The strongest elder pursued him relentlessly. The battle above the Gloomwater sect was devastating, where it even blotted out the celestial bodies. The beautiful cluster of mountains where the Gloomwater sect used to reside in had been reduced to a mess by the battle shockwaves. They collapsed one after another as countless holes appeared. Even the space there trembled violently from the battle, ripping open time and time again, revealing pitch-black cracks. All the disciples of the Gloomwater sect below God King had already fled into the surroundings. They were just too weak. Even the strongest of them were only over-gods, so they were unable to interfere with a battle between primordial realm experts at all. Even if they stood in formation and poured all their powers together, it would make no difference. The battle that determined the fate of the Gloomwater sect had already shaken up the entire aquaplane. Figures appeared one after another in the distance. There were many of them, and they were all primordial realm experts. The battle this time had basically drawn over all the primordial realm experts on the aquaplane. The powerful peak experts all sent the senses of their souls, while the weaker experts came in person. Moreover, as time passed, many god kings gathered in from the surroundings. They all stood afar as they watched this impressive battle. This battle lasted a total of 7 days and 7 nights. The ancient mountain range completely vanished after that, having been flattened by the powerful shockwaves. Even the ground sank several meters. Chapter 2455. Destroying the Sect. 3. After a bitter battle spanning 7 days and 7 nights, Jian Chen suffered more and more injuries. His wounds increased. Now, he was completely bloodied, and many places had already dried up. The several dozen primordial realm experts he fought died one after another at his hands during these 7 days. After Jian Chen massacred over 20 primordial realm experts, the remaining elders became frightened. They all lost interest in continuing to fight, so they ignored the strongest elders' calls and fled the Gloomwater sect. Jian Chen was powerless to stop their flight. Even though he was more powerful than them, it was impossible for him to make them all stay. In the end, only the 3 late infinite prime elders stayed behind. Resolve filled their eyes as they completely overcame their fear of death. They were ready to die with the sect and fight Jian Chen to the end. They were at the 7th heavenly layer, 8th heavenly layer, and 9th heavenly layer respectively. With their combined efforts, they completely suppressed Jian Chen, causing him to suffer more and more injuries. However, their situation was not great either. During these 7 days, they had used forbidden techniques that cannibalized their vitality to deal sure kill strikes in an attempt to kill off Jian Chen and end the battle. However, Jian Chen managed to endure it with his chaotic body each time. At the same time, Jian Chen was constantly recovering with his chaotic body, and with the assistance of healing pills, his wounds were not life-threatening despite seeming extremely miserable. His battle prowess did not decrease at all from the severe wounds. The energy within him seemed to be never-ending. On the other hand, the 3 elders gradually became exhausted after fighting for so long and losing all their vitality from secret techniques. Jian Chen's body is far too tough. We can't keep going like this. We have to end it now, thought the strongest elder of the Gloomwater sect. He looked at the leather gloves on his hands like he was reluctant to part with them. Even though the pair of gloves were only low-quality god artifacts, they had already reached the peak of low-quality god artifacts. Their value was evident. Moreover, special god artifacts like gloves were extremely rare in the saint's world. In order to forge a god artifact that suited him, he had paid a huge price and great efforts. But soon afterwards, the strongest elder made up his mind, and he suddenly tossed out the gloves on his hands. Swish! The pair of gloves turned into a blur as soon as they were thrown. They approached Jian Chen with great speed as destructive energy charged up inside. At the same time, the 2 other elders that Jian Chen fought against shot backwards, pulling far away from him. Jian Chen became cautious. He suddenly felt an intense sense of threat, and he immediately looked at the gloves that shot over. He was extremely stern. How bold of you to blow up your god artifact! Jian Chen called out. His presence had been locked onto by the pair of gloves, or more accurately, the artifact spirit of the god artifact. As such, he could not dodge it at all. He could only receive it forcefully. Jian Chen did not dare to be careless. He immediately circulated his chaotic force as hard as he could, pushing the defenses of his chaotic body to the limit. At the same time, the power of the laws of the sword condensed from the surroundings, forming a thick screen of light around him. At the same time, the 9-star sword of heavenly ways erupted with a great pulse of power. With the laws of the sword and the laws of strength together, he suddenly swung his sword at the pair of gloves. Boom! A thunderous rumble rang out. The pair of gloves shone resplendently and shattered with earth-shaking power, scattering in the surroundings. The explosion of a god artifact was simply too powerful. Space collapsed and the world cracked. As the terrifying shockwave expanded, it forced back many of the senses of the souls from chaotic primes there. Even the many primordial realm experts who had gathered over from various places on the aquaplane retreated from the blast. Jian Chen suffered devastating wounds because he was at the center of the explosion. The 9-star sword of heavenly ways in his hand had dimmed, and the protective screen of light around him shattered as soon as the attack arrived. His chaotic body was in ruins. The flesh before his chest had vanished, revealing the obliterated organs in there. That was not it. Even his sword-wielding right arm had been ripped off. The 9-star sword of heavenly ways, along with his entire right arm, was swept far away under the shockwave. Jian Chen immediately paled as his body was blown away like a broken kite. This time, he was truly heavily injured. Even his chaotic body was reduced to ruins. He no longer bore any resemblance to his previous self. He seemed extremely miserable. With a flash, the strongest elder of the Gloomwater sect used the opportunity to follow up with attacks. He passed through the shockwave of energy in an instant and caught up with Jian Chen. With a cold smile, he directly sent a palm strike towards Jian Chen's head. He was extremely fast. Jian Chen, I would like to see how you block my attack this time. You have no right to kill me unless you become a chaotic prime. Even though he was heavily injured and had lost an arm, Jian Chen did not become flustered at all. With a thought, an astonishing wave of sword chi immediately appeared. A shining, finger-sized strand of sword chi suddenly condensed above his head. It shone with blinding light. It was the profound sword chi. Now that he faced death, he could no longer worry about the profound sword chi being recognized and exposing his identity as a result. He used it without hesitation. The elder's face changed drastically. He could sense a life-threatening danger from the tiny strand of sword chi. However, before he could respond to it, the tiny strand of sword chi turned into a streak of white light. It tore through time and space, striking out with lightning speed and ripping through the strongest elder's forehead. The elder grunted as his face became warped by the extreme pain. His soul had been heavily injured. Jian Chen's gaze turned cold. He raised his remaining hand and threw a punch towards the elder's head. Even though the elder was a 9th heavenly layer infinite prime, his body was nowhere as tough as Jian Chen's. His head directly exploded from Jian Chen's punch and his soul dispersed. A 9th heavenly layer infinite prime was dead. The remaining 2 elders were both furious and shocked as they stared at their companion's headless corpse. They did not know how he had died due to the rampaging energy earlier. However, they only hesitated for a single moment. They glanced at each other before charging at Jian Chen decisively. There was no longer anything they could discuss now that everything had turned out like this. Only one side could survive in the end. Jian Chen's eyes were cold. He was not afraid at all. He stretched out his left hand, and a streak of light immediately flew over. The dim 9-star sword of heavenly ways returned to his hand, and he stowed his severed right hand away. Recovering limbs were no longer anything difficult for people with Jian Chen's level of cultivation. Even if their bodies were destroyed, they could rebuild it. If he had some time, he would be able to reconnect his right arm. Jian Chen clenched his sword with his left hand. His presence did not weaken at all as he stood in the air. He was going to hold off both of them alone. Chapter 2456. A tremendous amount of resources. He had a total of 3 strands of profound sword chi, so he was left with 2 after killing off the strongest elder. They were perfect for dealing with the remaining 2 elders. Originally, he could have condensed a 4th strand of profound sword chi after he became a sword immortal, but condensing it would take quite a lot of time. Years or even decades would pass for each strand. He had either been running around everywhere or trying to hide his identity ever since he emerged from the Neptunian Divine Palace, so he never had time to condense the 4th strand. Even though there were only 3 strands of profound sword chi, the power of each strand was not set in stone. As Jian Chen grew in strength, they would become more and more powerful as well. As a result, after Jian Chen became a sword immortal, the might of the profound sword chi had reached a whole new level. It could no longer be compared to the past. The 2 remaining strands of profound sword chi were ready to be used in Jian Chen's soul. However, an extremely astonishing pulse of power appeared in the distance at this moment. The space behind the 2 remaining elders shook as extremely powerful energy condensed into 2-inch-wide palms that directly crushed towards the elders. These came from Su Ran. Perhaps she had sensed the danger that Jian Chen was in, so she took the opportunity to attack the 2 elders as she controlled the 9 tribulations incineration formation with her full strength. The expressions of the 2 elders changed drastically when they faced this attack from a chaotic prime. They immediately poured all the energy within them into their defenses as the power of laws revolved around them. However, even if they did all that they could, it was futile before a 5th heavenly layer chaotic prime's attack. The difference in strength was just too great. The 2 palm strikes condensed from energy tore through their defenses in an unstoppable manner and landed on their bodies. Spurt! Spurt! Blood sprayed from the mouths of the 7th and 8th heavenly layer infinite primes of the Gloomwater sect. They were sent flying like broken kites, heavily injured. Su Ran placed most of her focus on the 9 tribulations incineration formation. The attack clearly did not possess her full strength, so they were only heavily injured and not killed off on the spot. Jian Chen, kill them quickly. Su Ran's voice rang out. With that, the 9 tribulations incineration formation that trapped the 4 great elders shook. Jian Chen's eyes became cold. He turned towards the elders who Su Ran had knocked away, and with a thought, the 9-star sword of heavenly ways in his left hand immediately flew out. As a streak of light, It shot towards the two elders with lightning speed under the control of his mind. The two elders immediately resisted to the best of their ability, but they were heavily injured after taking on Su Ran's fifth heavenly layer chaotic prime attack. Their strength had decreased drastically, as they were extremely frail. They could not even unleash half of their peak condition strength, so their arms were cut off after blocking a few attacks from Jianchen. At the last moment, Jianchen's eyes shone with powerful killing intent. The power of the ultimate way of the sword combined with the 9-star sword of heavenly ways. Under the control of his mind, the sword cut through their heads with resplendent starlight. With that, he had killed off the last two elders. After a bitter battle spanning 7 days and 7 nights, the infinite prime elders of the Gloomwater sect, over 40 in total, had either died or fled. Now, only the 4 chaotic prime great elders remained standing arduously. Jianchen did not lighten up at all after killing the infinite primes. This time, he had come to destroy the Gloomwater sect and avenge Kaya. As long as the chaotic primes remained alive, the Gloomwater sect would not have been destroyed. The 9-star sword of heavenly ways hung over Jianchen's head with a dim glow. Jianchen looked at the 9-star sword of heavenly ways in the distance. As he did that, he grabbed his severed right arm with his left arm and steadily brought it to his right shoulder. As his chaotic force circulated, he completely unleashed the regenerative powers of the chaotic body. The stub remaining from his severed arm squirmed, and the crack between the limb and shoulder vanished at a visible rate. In just a few seconds, Jianchen reconnected his right arm. Of course, this reconnection was only a layer of skin at the very surface. He still needed some time before he could join the severed flesh and bone. However, Jianchen did not have enough time to heal his arm. He fell down from the sky. One by one, he removed the space rings from the primordial realm experts he had killed. Primordial realm experts, even if they were only infinite primes, possessed extremely astonishing wealth. There were over 20 space rings, and one of them even belonged to a 9th heavenly layer infinite prime. It went without thinking just how astonishing the combined wealth in the space rings would be. However, Jianchen did not just collect the space ring. He stowed the corpses of the primordial realm experts away as well. He did not miss a single one. The corpses of primordial realm experts were rare. They were the best nourishment for the immortal devouring orchid. Why is Jianchen collecting their corpses? It makes sense for him to take their space rings, but it's the first time I've seen someone take the corpses away as well. Does Jianchen plan on burying the dead elders for the Gloomwater sect? It looks like Jianchen is a person with upstanding morals. Although he has grievances with the Gloomwater sect and has come to destroy them, he treats these dead elders with respect. He's collecting the corpses for them so that they don't have to die a graveless death. Many people discussed Jianchen's actions. Many of the conversations indicated admiration towards Jianchen. Jianchen ignored the conversations. After stowing away all the corpses of the primordial realm experts, he looked in another direction in pity. That was where the leader of the great elders, the 9th heavenly layer chaotic prime, had passed away. He had been slain by the child from the myriad bone guild. His body had exploded, and not even a corpse was left behind. Jianchen sighed gently inside. As he healed, he arrived beside the 9 tribulations incineration formation. Several chaotic primes were trapped in there. "Senior Su, let me help you out," said Jianchen. "How are your wounds?" Su Ran's voice rang out from the 9 tribulations incineration formation. She did not stay outside. Instead, she was in there dealing with the chaotic primes. "It's no big deal," said Jianchen. The chaotic body was simply too tough. Even if he were extremely heavily injured and could not use his right arm, his battle prowess was not affected much. "Fantastic! I've already killed the early chaotic prime out of the 4 trapped in the formation. The 3 people remaining are at the 4th, 5th, and 8th heavenly layer. Under the protection of the 8th heavenly layer chaotic prime, it's rather difficult for me to kill the other 2. Jianchen, come control the 9 tribulations incineration formation. I'll use my full strength. Even if I have to get injured, I have to kill the 4th heavenly layer chaotic prime." As long as one more of them dies, the effect from the formation will increase, and it'll be even easier for me to deal with them, Su Ran said sternly. There's no need to do that. Senior Su, allow me to assist you in directly killing off the 8th heavenly layer chaotic prime. Do it. Jianchen called out. His 2 remaining strands of profound sword chi appeared together before shooting into the formation as a streak of light. They headed directly towards the 8th heavenly layer chaotic prime. Chapter 2457. A great disturbance. The profound sword chi was a peak god tier technique. It took from nature itself, born from the ways. The old master of the twin swords, with his supreme cultivation as a grand exalt, had poured his heart out and spent a huge amount of time to create this peak god tier technique. It was the trump card of a grand exalt. Its depth and strength could not be compared to regular god tier battle skills. As a result, even though the 8th heavenly layer chaotic prime within the formation sensed the 2 strands of profound sword chi, he was unable to dodge it. The 2 strands of profound sword chi directly bypassed the energy defenses around him. As a streak of light, they shot into his forehead at the same time with unbelievable speed. Immediately, blankness appeared in the eyes of the great elder momentarily. At the same time, his actions slowed down. However, that was all. His expression remained unchanged after taking on the 2 strands of profound sword chi. He did not show any signs of pain at all. He only became temporarily lost. The blankness only lasted for a moment. Very soon, his eyes cleared up again. After all, he was an 8th heavenly layer chaotic prime. His soul was just too powerful. Jian Chen's profound sword chi was more than enough to deal with 9th heavenly layer infinite primes, but it was still a little too early for him to try to handle 8th heavenly layer chaotic primes. Let alone 2 strands of profound sword chi, he would probably struggle to harm such an expert even if he used all 3. However, the 8th heavenly layer chaotic prime's opponent was not just Jianchen. There was also Su Ran, who stood in the formation. As a result, Su Ran struck out decisively in the instant that the great elder was dazed. Laws wrapped around her skinny hand, and it shot towards his head with terrifying power. Wherever the hand passed by, space cracked. It was extremely powerful, possessing devastating might. When the great elder returned to his senses, Su Ran's hand had already shattered the protective energy around him and arrived above his head. It made his face change drastically. The short moment of daze had decided the final victor already. Bang! With that, the great elder's head exploded loudly from Su Ran's attack. Su Ran's strike was simply too powerful. After obliterating the head, the destructiveness continued downwards into the body. In the end, the 8th heavenly layer chaotic prime was reduced to a bloody mist, leaving no corpse behind. Jian Chen winced when he saw this from outside the 9 tribulations incineration formation. If he fed the body of an 8th heavenly layer chaotic prime to the immortal devouring orchid, its strength would rise drastically. However, the corpse had been blown to pieces and no longer remained. The leftovers no longer held much value. Senior Su, if it's possible, try to keep their bodies intact, Jianchen said to Su Ran. The corpses of chaotic primes were just too rare. Even if there was only a sliver of chance of obtaining a corpse, he did not want to miss it. This was because the growth of the immortal devouring orchid required a large number of corpses of experts. There was no suspense in the remainder of the battle. Without the protection of the 8th heavenly layer chaotic prime, the 2 mid-chaotic prime great elders still trapped in the formation could not last very long against Su Ran. They both died. Su Ran also fulfilled Jian Chen's request. She purposefully controlled her power when she killed the 2, leaving behind complete corpses. With the battle coming to an end, Su Ran took the 9 tribulations incineration formation apart. She was rather pale, and she seemed exhausted. Even with the 9 tribulations incineration formation, the battle clearly had not been easy for her. She had even suffered some injuries. The 9 tribulations incineration formation has become rather damaged. After all, its limit was 7th heavenly layer chaotic primes. If you use it again, its power will decrease. Su Ran looked at the formation banners in her hands as she felt pained. Jianchen took out a jade bottle and flew to where the 8th heavenly layer chaotic prime had passed away. He did his best to collect the blood that had not fallen to the ground. This blood also contained very powerful pulses of energy. They could be used to increase the immortal devouring orchid strength. The experts gathered outside the Gloomwater sect remained silent. They stared at the ruined sect with mixed feelings. The few great elders had all died, and the infinite prime elders had either died or fled. All the God King disciples were dead, and the disciples below God Kings had fled long ago. Who knows where they were now? They knew that the Gloomwater sect had truly ceased to exist now. Even if a few disciples remained, they would not be able to achieve anything major. A mighty peak sect has been destroyed just like this. Sigh. From today onwards, the number of peak organizations on the Aquaplane has decreased by one once again. The ancestor of the Gloomwater sect, the elder of mountains and seas, has probably suffered a terrible fate as well. The Gloomwater sect has truly ceased to exist. In the surroundings, many experts discussed the matter in amazement. The powerful senses of the souls discussed with one another and sighed emotionally as they moved about above the Gloomwater sect. The Gloomwater sect has been completely destroyed. It's just a pity that all the hell water the Gloomwater sect has accumulated across the years will be taken by Jianchen so easily. Even the Point Cloud Venerable has stepped forward and spoken. The hell water is very valuable, but it is not worth offending the Point Cloud Venerable over it. The destruction of the Gloomwater sect spread across the Aquaplane like a storm. It shook up the entire Aquaplane, stunning countless people. After all, the Gloomwater sect was a renowned, peak organization on the Aquaplane. In the eyes of many, the Gloomwater sect was an ultimate, indomitable existence, but it had suddenly been destroyed in the blink of an eye. This matter was simply too astonishing. So many found it difficult to believe. During the next period of time, people across the Aquaplane discussed how Jianchen had destroyed the Gloomwater sect. It was a hot topic of conversation. The cause of this entire matter, Jianchen, sat with Su Ran in the ruins of the Gloomwater sect to heal their wounds. This place was originally a beautiful mountain range. Previously, the mountains stretched one after another, shrouded by mist. It was a landscape of otherworldly beauty. But now, it had been reduced to a barren land. Not only were the mountains flattened, but the entire land had also sunk from the 7 days of battle. Many bottomless holes had appeared. Kaya, can you see this? I've already destroyed the Gloomwater sect. I've avenged you. Jianchen healed up as he looked at the ruined land. He did not feel any joy from destroying the Gloomwater sect. Instead, he was filled with sorrow. Chapter 2458. A stubborn divine hall, he had destroyed the Gloomwater sect. The elder of mountains and seas was dead, the 5 great elders were dead, and he had even killed off most of the elders. The Gloomwater sect no longer existed on the Aquaplane. However, departed people could not return. The pretty face that once appeared before him and the beautiful figure that he once saw was gone forever. All that remained was an unforgettable memory in his head. At the same time, a hazy figure shrouded by light sat within the depths of the heavenly palace of Bishing. The light blurred his figure and appearance. Only a pair of ice-cold eyes were visible. However, the space before him seemed to become a mirror, reflecting the Gloomwater sect on the Aquaplane clearly. Jianchen and Su Ran happened to be standing there. His cold, emotionless gaze sometimes stared at Jianchen and sometimes focused on other things. When he heard Jianchen's voice, the cold, emotionless gaze wavered. He became rather stunned at that moment. Profound Sword Chi. I never thought Jianchen would have grasped the Profound Sword Chi. That's the old bastard's greatest trump card aside from the fusion of the twin swords, murmured the blood-tear Grand Exalt to himself in a blood-red shroud on the distant Devour Plane. Moreover, Jianchen has comprehended the ultimate way of the sword. Out of the 2 great sword gods of the Immortals world, only the Nirvanic Immortal Exalt grasped the ultimate way of the sword. Jianchen now possesses the potential to become a sword god. If he matures completely, it'll be extremely likely for him to become a sword god, and that happens to be enough to condense the 9th strand of profound sword chi. Once all 9 strands are condensed, the profound sword chi's power will be world-shaking. However, he has already become an Ata's fruit of ways. He's not fated to make it very far, the blood tear Grand Exalt murmured to himself. After spending an entire day healing in the ruins of the Gloomwater sect, Jian Chen's severed right arm was basically reattached now. His bones had reconnected. Even though it had not returned to its previous state, which prevented him from fighting like he usually could, it did not affect his movement. Even the vicious wounds on his damaged body had mostly recovered. The missing flesh on his chest had regrown as well. Of course, this was only the surface. He had been too heavily wounded this time. As such, even with the supreme regeneration of the chaotic body, he still struggled to make a full recovery in a single day. His wounds remained very heavy. I probably need half a month of recovery this time. Only then will I return to my peak condition, Jian Chen thought as he inspected his wounds. That was already astonishing enough. After all, if other experts suffered such severe wounds, it would have taken them several millennia or even several dozen millennia to make a full recovery. However, Jian Chen only needed half a month. Jian Chen stood up after that day and began tidying up the battlefield. As a peak sect, the Gloomwater sect naturally possessed an extremely rich heritage. The various cultivation resources, countless battle skills, and cultivation methods were an astonishing wealth to Jian Chen. He obviously had to collect it all. With a flash, he arrived before a huge pit 100 kilometers away and leapt in. Before long, the ground shook gently. The earth around the pit heaved, and a huge divine hall slowly rose out. Jian Chen supported the divine hall from below with both hands, unleashing astonishing strength to lift the entire divine hall out from underground. Boom! The earth shook violently as Jian Chen tossed the divine hall onto the ground heavily. This divine hall is a medium-quality god artifact, but it ranks towards the bottom among medium-quality divine halls. Su Ran appeared near the divine hall as well. She studied it calmly and continued, "This divine hall is the only medium-quality god artifact in the Gloomwater sect. All of their wealth should be inside it. However, it won't be easy for you to enter it. First, you need to gain the recognition of the artifact spirit and become the divine hall's master." Jian Chen stood before the divine hall and stared at its entrance quietly. He had already expanded the senses of his soul, communicating with the divine hall's artifact spirit. "My master is the elder of mountains and seas. My master died because of you, and you even destroyed the sect that master founded after so much difficulty. I will never accept you as my master," said the artifact spirit coldly. It was extremely stubborn. Afterwards, the entire divine hall began to shrink. It turned into the size of a thumb and flew away, arriving before an infinite prime who had been spectating the battle 100 kilometers away. "I want you as my master. I'm willing to accept you as my master," said the artifact spirit to the middle-aged infinite prime. The artifact spirit was not confused. He chose this middle-aged man who was only an infinite prime due to ulterior motives. The middle-aged man's status was rather great on the aquaplane. He was the current sect master of the Scorching Sun sect. The Scorching Sun sect was a peak organization that stood beside the Gloomwater sect. Their ancestor was also a peak expert who stood at the apex of the plane. The artifact spirit of the divine hall would rather take someone else as his master than yield to Jian Chen. A gleam of light shone through the eyes of the sect master. He did not agree immediately. Instead, he hesitated. The medium-quality divine hall contained all the resources and wealth of the Gloomwater sect. Even to the Scorching Sun sect, this was extremely tempting. However, he was also wary about the orders that his ancestor had given him. The ancestor had ordered him not to get involved with the mess of the Gloomwater sect. Many gazes gathered on him from the surroundings. Many people showed envy. Some experts from peak organizations looked at the sect master in thought. They had already received orders from their ancestors not to touch a single possession of the Gloomwater sect. Otherwise, it would have been impossible for the Gloomwater sect's divine hall to remain here until now. It would have been taken away long ago. Jian Chen did nothing. He stared at the sect master coldly. He did not recognize the sect master, but since the artifact spirit had chosen an infinite prime to be his master, it meant that the middle-aged man possessed quite the status. He wanted to see just how great of a deterrent the Point Cloud Venerable was on the aquaplane. After hesitating for a while, the sect master of the Scorching Sun sect shook his head in the end. He declined the artifact spirit. This was because he had received another message from the Scorching Sun sect's ancestor. I have over 10 droplets of hell water here. If you become my master and ensure that the legacy of the Gloomwater sect continues, all the hell water and resources will go to you, the artifact spirit bellowed at the sky. He knew there were the senses of the soul from several peak experts there, so he wanted to tempt them with the hell water. As expected, many powerful senses of the soul pulsed after hearing the mention of over 10 droplets of hell water. Clearly, they were interested. Hell water was simply too precious. It was enough to tempt them. At this moment, Su Ran snorted coldly. She arrived before the divine hall in a flash and pressed down on it with a hand. Terrifying energy surged and suppressed the divine hall. The divine hall suddenly expanded, becoming several tens of thousand meters wide and long in a single moment. It surged with light as it used all the power in the divine hall to resist. I'm already a medium-quality god artifact. I'm not that easy to subdue. Even if you can suppress me, I will never yield to you, the artifact spirit called out stubbornly. Afterwards, he called out at the sky once again, trying to use the hell water to tempt the peak experts who stood at the apex of the plane. Chapter 2459. Hun Zhang's might. The powerful senses of the souls above the Gloomwater sect clearly began to waver after the artifact spirit of the divine halls tempted them again and again. They began to hesitate inside. For a moment, they were stuck in a dilemma between what the Point Cloud Venerable had said and a medium-quality god artifact, over 10 droplets of hell water, and the wealth that the Gloomwater sect had accumulated over the years. They were conflicted. The Point Cloud Venerable's words indeed made them fearful, as he was a famed expert from the Star Brilliance plane. With the combination of his laws of space and laws of time, he had the power to challenge those with higher cultivation. No one was more powerful than the Point Cloud Venerable on the entire aquaplane. However, they were unable to turn a blind eye to all the wealth that the Gloomwater sect had accumulated across so many years either. Jian Chen stood before the divine hall. Currently, he was uneasy. He could make low-quality god artifacts yield with his current strength, but he felt powerless when he looked at the medium-quality god artifact. With his strength, he could take away the divine hall forcefully. However, once the divine hall became thousands of meters wide or even larger, was he supposed to cross through space while carrying something countless times larger than a mountain? Having lost the Eneta Tower, he no longer possessed something that could hold a medium-quality god artifact. He would only be able to store the divine hall if the artifact spirit allowed it. At this moment, a hazy figure silently appeared in the air. The power of laws permeated his surroundings and shrouded his appearance completely. However, he did give off an extremely terrifying presence that made the world pale in comparison. He was definitely a Grand Prime. His appearance made the faces of Jian Chen and Su Ran sink slightly. They sensed an ill omen. "If you are willing to come with me, I can take you away," said the Grand Prime to the artifact spirit. His voice was old but powerful. "The matters of the Gloomwater sect have nothing to do with me, and I have no interest in interfering either. If you yield to me willingly, I won't be taking you away forcefully," he said afterwards. It was like he was directing these words to Jian Chen and Su Ran and was stressing his innocence to everyone. Jian Chen and Su Ran's faces immediately changed when they heard that. "All right, I'll accept you as my master," the artifact spirit of the divine hall agreed without a second thought. He immediately used his full strength to try to break free from Su Ran's suppression. He wanted to escape. The Grand Prime did nothing. The power of laws permeated around him as he stood there leisurely, waiting patiently. However, an extremely obscure power radiated from him, drifting towards the divine hall. He did not attack Su Ran directly because doing so would be equivalent to stealing. He was afraid of offending the Point Cloud Venerable. However, if he assisted the Divine Hall in breaking free from Su Ran, allowing it to fly into his hands, the meaning would be completely different. However, at this moment, a powerful pulse of energy appeared in outer space. A huge, illusionary mountain appeared in the space beyond the aquaplane, giving off a tremendous pressure. 7 figures sat on the illusionary mountain. Their presences were drawn out as energy surged in their bodies, making them seem like a part of the mountain. It's the Martial Soul Mountain. The people of the Martial Soul lineage have come. The 7 people of the Martial Soul lineage have actually all come. It's rumored that Jianchen possesses Martial Soul Force and is the 8th successor of the current generation of the Martial Soul lineage. Without any doubt, they've come for Jianchen. With the Martial Soul Mountain's appearance, all the peak experts on the aquaplane were no longer able to remain composed. They all became stern. The expression of the Grand Prime who wanted to take the Divine Hall away changed as well as he hovered in the sky. "Ah, Brother Jianchen, we've finally found you." A great chuckle rang out. The black-robed Hun Zong flew down from the Martial Soul Mountain. He moved with lightning speed, appearing in the sky above the Gloomwater sect in a flash. "You're only a medium-quality god artifact. Serving Brother Jianchen and becoming a part of our Martial Soul Mountain is the greatest fortune you've ever encountered in your life, yet you don't treasure it at all." "Humph," Hun Zong snorted coldly. He arrived before the Divine Hall with a flash and kicked it. Bang! With a heavy thud, the air exploded. From Hun Zhang's foot, the medium-quality god artifact had been booted far away. "You ungrateful thing. If it weren't for the fact that you're the spoils of Brother Jianchen's battle, I would have shattered you to pieces long ago. I would have made you disperse into the surroundings," Hun Zong swore. Afterwards, he opened his hand, and the flying Divine Hall seemed to become bound by a mysterious power, flying back into Hun Zhang's hand. Hun Zong directly struck the Divine Hall with his hand, erupting with devastating power. He beat the Divine Hall into the ground. Immediately, the Divine Hall dimmed. All the protective formations on the Divine Hall became useless at that moment. The energy that supported the formations was completely depleted by Hun Zhang's strike. A Divine Hall that was equivalent to a medium-quality god artifact could not even withstand a single strike from Hun Zong. All the spectating Primordial Realm experts gasped when they saw how Hun Zong had overwhelmed a medium-quality god artifact in such a brutal fashion. Even the peak experts who hid secretly and paid attention to this place at all times with the senses of their souls were afraid of Hun Zong. Jianchen finally became relieved. He understood that there would probably be no more people who would be interested in the Divine Hall as long as Hun Zong was here. He had witnessed Hun Zhang's battle prowess on the desolate plain. Even though members of the Martial Soul lineage could never break through to Grand Prime, Hun Zhang's battle prowess was definitely at the level of Grand Primes. Hun Zong looked at the Grand Prime shrouded by the power of laws after beating the Divine Hall into the ground. His eyes turned cold and he said, "It seems like you were interested in the Divine Hall earlier." Of course not, of course not. Since the Divine Hall belongs to your Martial Soul lineage, I naturally have no interest in it. "Farewell," said the Grand Prime with a smile before clasping his fist and disappearing. He had departed from the area. With the departure of the Grand Prime, all the senses of the souls that roamed through the sky receded. Everyone knew that the following events would go without saying since the people of the Martial Soul Mountain had arrived. Hun Zong arrived before Jianchen. He could tell Jianchen's wounds with a single glance, and he immediately showed concern. "Brother Jianchen, are you fine?" "Thank you for your concern, Brother Hun Zong. My wounds aren't a problem," said Jianchen. "Jianchen, why didn't you come to the Martial Soul Mountain to look for us when you wanted to destroy the Gloomwater sect? As long as we took part, destroying the mere Gloomwater sect would have been as easy as cake. Although we, the Martial Soul lineage, never actively provoke others, we won't let anyone exploit us if they come provoking us." Qing Shan also flew down from outer space as he looked at Jianchen unhappily. Chapter 2460. The 8 successors. Qing Shan seemed to be around Jianchen's age. He wore a set of simple, azure robes and had quite a striking appearance. However, he seemed much more steady-minded compared to before. When Jian Chen encountered Qing Shan for the first time in the world of Moon and Star, the latter was still a god king. However, he had reached the primordial realm now, having become an infinite prime. Qing Shan is completely right. Brother Jian Chen, you need to understand that all members of the martial soul lineage are one big family. We may not always be able to share our fortunes, but we will definitely go through hardships together. Your matters are the matters of the entire martial soul lineage. Since you have grievances with the Gloomwater sect, that means our martial soul lineage has grievances with the Gloomwater sect. You should have called us before you came to destroy the Gloomwater sect, Han Zong added from one side. He did not act with the haughtiness of an expert towards Jian Chen at all. Instead, he exhibited a deep bond of brothers. He patted Jian Chen's shoulder and said, "And with the Gloomwater sect's strength, it really isn't anything to our martial soul lineage. Apart from the Elder of Mountains and Seas, the rest aren't worth mentioning." Han Zhang's tone revealed his contempt towards the Gloomwater sect. Although the Gloomwater sect was a peak sect on the Aquaplane, Han Zhang did not take them seriously at all. Jian Chen's heart warmed up when he heard the words of Qing Shan and Han Zhang. He could clearly feel that Qing Shan and Han Zhang truly treated him as their brother. There were no ulterior motives at all. Moreover, when he was trapped on the desolate plain last time, the 7 successors of the martial soul lineage had stepped forward and stood up for him. They did not fear the many peak experts and had disregarded the potential consequences. They stopped all the peak experts there, which touched Jian Chen deeply. He had seen too much deception and too much betrayal in his life. However, the successors of the martial soul lineage treated him as one of their own completely because he possessed martial soul force. They treated him like that even though they were strangers before. They were not defensive or cautious of Jian Chen at all, which touched his heart. "Brother Jian Chen, come to the Martial Soul Mountain with us. The Martial Soul Mountain is our homeland." In the end, Han Zhang extended a sincere invitation to Jian Chen. Jian Chen hesitated. He desired the records regarding martial soul force on the Martial Soul Mountain very much. However, he did not forget about his true identity either. He had always been worried about whether he would drag the martial soul lineage down with him in the future due to a certain aspect. "Jian Chen, you really should pay a visit to the Martial Soul Mountain. The Martial Soul Mountain possesses what you need. If you could use martial soul force in that battle, it might have been much easier," Su Ran added when she saw Jian Chen's hesitation. She had already heard about how powerful martial soul force was. "Brother Jian Chen, we're both at the primordial realm. Your current battle prowess may have exceeded mine, but you're nowhere close to me in terms of martial soul force. You really should go cultivate on the Martial Soul Mountain properly," said Qing Shan as he chuckled towards Jian Chen. Jian Chen hesitated for a while longer before accepting Han Zhang and Qing Shan's invitation. After giving Su Ran some healing pills, he bid her farewell and stepped onto the Martial Soul Mountain outside the Aquaplane. The divine hall from the Gloomwater sect had shrunk to the size of a fist. It sat obediently in Han Zhang's hand after he personally suppressed it. There was also a hell spring deep beneath the Gloomwater sect. The hell water came from this hell spring. However, the hell spring was a wondrous geographic landmark that formed after countless years under the special environment of the Aquaplane. It could not be taken away, and it would take 1,000,000 years for a single hell spring to create a droplet of hell water. As a result, Jian Chen could only give up on the hell spring beneath the Gloomwater sect. Jian Chen soon already arrived on the Martial Soul Mountain beyond the Aquaplane under the lead of Han Zhang and Qing Shan. As soon as he stepped onto the Martial Soul Mountain, he discovered that the colossal mountain was not physical. Instead, it was created from a wondrous power. The power was so tremendous that it seemed earth-shaking to Jian Chen. The Martial Soul Mountain we stay on is an extremely wondrous place. Due to it being too powerful, we aren't able to control it completely with our powers. As such, we can't move the Martial Soul Mountain. We can only use a secret technique left behind by a few past seniors to control a small fraction of the Martial Soul Mountain's power. As a result, what you see right now is not the real Martial Soul Mountain. However, the mountain soul of the Martial Soul Mountain retains a connection with the Martial Soul Mountain wherever it is. No matter how distant we are from the martial soul mountain, we can return in a single moment, Hunzong explained to Jianchen before bringing him to the 5 people on the mountain soul. He introduced them to Jianchen one by one. After exchanging pleasantries, Jianchen gained a rough understanding of the successors of the martial soul lineage. Among the 7 of them, 3 were peak chaotic primes. Aside from Hunzong, the other 2 peak chaotic primes were Chu Jian and Yu Chao. However, Hunzong was the strongest of the 3. After them were Yun Ziding and Su Qi. Yun Ziding seemed to be in his 30s. He seemed scholarly and was a 5th heavenly layer chaotic prime. Su Qi was a beautiful young woman who seemed to be in her 20s. She was elegant and curvy, making her extremely attractive to men. She was a 3rd heavenly layer chaotic prime. The last 2 were by Ruffing and Qing Shan. The 2 of them were the weakest people among the 7 successors. They were both infinite primes. Now that Jianchen was included, the martial soul lineage possessed 3 infinite primes. However, Bai Ruffing had reached the 9th heavenly layer as an infinite prime already. He was only a step away from chaotic prime. The 8 successors of the martial soul lineage were composed of 5 chaotic primes and 3 infinite primes. Junior Jianchen, finding you was really difficult. After you left the desolate plain silently, the 7 of us used the power of the martial soul mountain to use a supreme secret technique together in search of you, but we found nothing in the end. The only woman in the martial soul lineage, Su Qi, studied Jianchen. She asked with a pleasant voice, "Junior Jianchen, can you tell your 5th senior sister just what grievances you had with the Gloomwater sect?" Jianchen became sorrowful when he heard that. He said in a pained voice, "The Elder of Mountains and Seas killed a close friend of mine. Even though he had already destroyed the Gloomwater sect, he was unable to erase his pain." Jianchen's heart stung whenever he thought about Kai Ya's death. "The Elder of Mountains and Seas knew you were a part of our martial soul lineage, yet he still hunted you down. We can't spare the Gloomwater sect if that's the case. We need to let the people of the Saints' world that our martial soul lineage is not a target for harassment. Juniors, please wait, I'll be right back." With that, Su Qi vanished. She had left the martial soul lineage and stepped onto the aquaplane. It looks like our martial soul lineage has maintained far too low of a profile in these years. It's time for the organizations of the Saints' world to remember who we are, Chu Jian added as his eyes shone coldly. Chapter 2461. The martial soul mountain. Hunzong and Yu Chao nodded in agreement. They did not say anything else. The 3 most powerful expert of the martial soul lineage, peak chaotic primes, stood up for Jianchen selflessly and complained about his injustices the moment that they met. They truly treated Jianchen as their brother. There was no difference in identity or strength separating them. When Jianchen witnessed this, he gained a new appraisal of the successors of the martial soul lineage. He felt even more eager to visit the martial soul mountain. They treat me like this, so there's even less of a reason for me to drag down the martial soul mountain, Jianchen thought as he made up his mind. He definitely would not remain on the martial soul mountain for long. Once he obtained the secret techniques and cultivation methods for martial soul force, he would leave the martial soul mountain. He wanted to be careful just in case. He did not want to cause trouble for the martial soul mountain after he had been exposed just in case he became too involved with them. At this moment, the 5th successor, Su Qi, returned to the martial soul mountain. She held a long whip in her hand that tied up 20 corpses. Even though they were already dead, they emitted a faint pressure. Their blood also contained very powerful energy. Clearly, they were all primordial realm experts. Jianchen glanced past them, and to his surprise, he discovered that all the corpses were elders who had fled from the Gloomwater sect. "I've killed all the remaining elders on the aquaplane from the Gloomwater sect. Junior Jianchen, this is my gift to you for our first meeting." Su Qi shook her hand, and the whip vanished. The 20 corpses were just presented before Jianchen just like that. Jianchen stared at the corpses blankly. He struggled to believe it. Although it would be effortless for Su Qi to kill infinite primes with her strength, these infinite primes were scattered across the entire aquaplane. They remained hidden the entire time, so finding them would have been almost impossible. This was because there were many infinite primes on each plane. Even if they were discovered, distinguishing them as people from the Gloomwater sect would not be easy. However, Su Qi was actually able to find all of them with great precision in such a short amount of time. This shocked Jianchen. At that moment, Jianchen began to look at Su Qi in a completely different light. She was definitely a vicious woman who could kill without blinking. Brother Jianchen, finding all the primordial realm experts from the Gloomwater sect on the aquaplane might pose some difficulty to us, but it's nothing for Su Qi because she has grasped secret techniques for that, explained Hunzong. Su Qi giggled and said, none of the primordial realm experts from the Gloomwater sect remain. Since the primordial realm experts are dead, the Gloomwater sect is completely done for. We'll just let the remaining godhood experts run their course. Su Qi did not kill the innocent. She specifically targeted the primordial realm experts and never directed her attention towards the weaker disciples. Jianchen immediately clasped his fist in gratitude. His original intentions were only to kill off the greater forces of the Gloomwater sect. He never planned on touching the clueless, weaker disciples, so he supported Su Qi's actions very much. Afterwards, Jianchen stowed away all the corpses. Under Su Qi's insistence, Jianchen accepted all the space rings on the corpses as a gift. The martial soul mountain left the aquaplane. Jianchen felt the world spin around him as he stood on the martial soul mountain as if everything had been reversed. In just 5 seconds, he discovered to his surprise that he was no longer standing on the illusionary mountain soul but on actual land. He discovered that the martial soul mountain remained the same as far as he could see. The only difference was that the colossal martial soul mountain was no longer illusionary but physical. In just 5 seconds, he seemed to have crossed a tremendous distance. He could no longer see any traces of the aquaplane. He had appeared in a completely foreign region of space. The martial soul mountain floated alone in the vast sea of stars. This is the true martial soul mountain, a home that belongs only to our martial soul lineage, Qing Shan said as he started to explain the situation of the martial soul mountain in depth to Jianchen. Through Qing Shan's explanations, Jianchen gained an even clearer understanding of the martial soul mountain. No one in the saints' world could explain the origins of the martial soul mountain because it had existed for far, far too long. It surpassed the lives of any grand exalt in the current saints' world. Although the martial soul mountain was described as a mountain, it was an extremely powerful god artifact as well. It was where the martial soul lineage stood safely, the root of the martial soul lineage. It was the last line of defense that protected the martial soul lineage. It was also known as the origin of the martial soul lineage, the ancestral grounds, and so on. This was because a lot of knowledge and cultivation methods regarding martial soul force were recorded on the martial soul mountain. These were all left behind by past seniors of the martial soul lineage. There was a tremendous amount of information. This knowledge and cultivation methods allowed any wielder of martial soul force to grow rapidly as soon as they set foot on the martial soul mountain, sculpting generations upon generations of experts. Jianchen, you can't underestimate the martial soul mountain. As long as we stand here, there's only a handful of peak experts who can threaten us, Qing Shan said proudly. Jianchen studied the martial soul mountain. As he learnt more and more about the martial soul mountain, his admiration for it deepened as well. Since the martial soul mountain is so powerful, it should have its own consciousness, right? Like an artifact spirit? Qing Shan did not reply immediately when asked this question. Instead, he sank into his thoughts and replied a while later, all of us have once considered that because the martial soul mountain is so powerful, if it were a god artifact, it should possess an artifact spirit. Even if it isn't a god artifact, it should have its independent consciousness, but we've actually never discovered any intelligence that belongs to the martial soul mountain at all. In all these years, it only seems like a dead object with great power in our eyes. And what's up with the mountain soul? Isn't that the soul of the martial soul mountain? Jianchen asked curiously. The so-called mountain soul is actually a tiny portion of power siphoned from the martial soul mountain through our secret techniques. It can assist us in battle. So far, we don't have the ability to change the martial soul mountain's trajectory and take it wherever we want in the Saint's world. As a result, when we fight outside and aren't powerful enough, we will transfer a tiny sliver of the martial soul mountain's power. Not only does it strengthen us, but it also gives us a path of retreat. The 8 of them walked through the martial soul mountain side by side. They did not stand in any particular order. They conversed as they made their way towards the top of the martial soul mountain. Very soon, they arrived at the very top and stopped in a cave. "Jianchen, this is the sacred grounds of our martial soul lineage," said Hunzong. He stared at the cave solemnly. He could not hide the respect on his face. Chapter 2462. The glorious past. It was not just Hunzong. Chu Jian, Yu Chao, Yun Ziding, Su Qi, Bai Ruffing, and Qing Shan also became extremely solemn when they arrived before the cave. They showed great respect. Jian became interested when he sensed their changes. After a moment of thought, he looked at the cave before him as well. The light in his eyes flickered as he seemed to fall into thought. Historically, the martial soul lineage always has very few people. Even during our most glorious, most resplendent age, we only had 9 people. As a result, no matter what time or age it is, gaining an additional senior or junior is an extremely significant matter for our martial soul lineage. But today, our martial soul lineage has welcomed an 8th brother. Even across our lengthy history, it's extremely rare to have 8 of us at the same time. According to the ancient archives, the number of successors roughly remained at 5 to 6 in the past eras. There were not a lot of times when 7 appeared, but 8 members appearing means that our martial soul lineage is approaching a new age of glory. Hunzong suddenly became excited when he reached there. He glanced past everyone as he struggled to contain his excitement. He said happily, "Now we finally have 8 members. That means that our martial soul lineage will stand proudly in the Saint's world in the near future and become even more magnificent." "Yeah, 8 of us. There's finally 8 of us. I've waited for this day for far too long." Chu Jian was also glad. He was eager about the martial soul lineage's future. Yu Chao, Yun Ziding, Su Qi, Bai Ruffing, and Qing Shan all smiled as well. They looked forward to the future. Only Jianchen was left clueless among them. He looked at them in doubt and asked out of puzzlement, "I am a little confused. Does every extra successor that the martial soul lineage possesses affect the future of the entire martial soul lineage? The strength of an organization is not based off number but based of their strongest expert. Members of our martial soul lineage can never break through to Grand Prime, so it probably won't affect much at all even if we gain a few more people." Hunzong and the others looked at Jianchen with a mysterious smile when they heard that. Yu Chao explained, "Jianchen, our martial soul lineage isn't as simple as you imagine it to be. Every member of the martial soul lineage represents a portion of fortune for the martial soul lineage. The more people we have, the greater our fortune will be. Now that we have 8 successors at the same time, it means that the martial soul lineage has already condensed the fortune of the 8 of us. This fortune will affect the future of our martial soul lineage without us knowing. Of course, that is only if none of us die. Once someone dies, it won't be the fortune of 8 people anymore." "What if a 9th member appears?" Jianchen asked. He suddenly discovered that the martial soul lineage was far more complicated than he had imagined it to be. 9 members. This time, everyone fell quiet. A strange light flickered in all of their eyes. It was as if 9 members was not just a number or a gathering of fortune. Instead, it seemed to hide even deeper secrets. A while later, Yu Chao exhaled deeply. He said with some melancholy, 9 members. 9 members. When 9 members exist together, the fortune of our martial soul lineage will peak. It has only happened once throughout our history, and that time was a glorious age that changed the entire fate of our martial soul lineage. After a moment of pause, Yu Chao suddenly looked at Jianchen sternly. He asked, "Jianchen, with Hunzang's cultivation as a 9th heavenly layer chaotic prime, he's no weaker than a 3rd heavenly layer grand prime, and he can even fight 4th heavenly layer grand primes. Do you know why?" Isn't it because of martial soul force and your martial soul array? Jianchen asked. Back then, he did not have the effort to spare to pay close attention to the battle between Han Zong and the many experts on the desolate plain. He obviously did not know why. Martial soul force and the martial soul array indeed provides great assistance, but it's impossible to reach the level of a third heavenly layer Grand Prime from those alone. The true reason is that while Brother Hun Zhang's comprehension remains at the 9th heavenly layer of chaotic prime, his cultivation has already reached Grand Prime, Yu Chao said sternly. Jianchen was shocked. Comprehension referred to the comprehension of the ways of the world, the grasp over the laws, while cultivation represented the energy within someone. What Yu Chao had said basically meant that although Hun Zhang's comprehension of the laws of the world remained at the level of chaotic primes, the power within him had already reached the level of grand primes. This filled Jianchen with disbelief because all cultivators, regardless of strength, were restrained by their comprehension. If they wanted to break through to the next level, they had to break through with their comprehension of the laws of the world. Only then could their cultivation increase. This was the law for cultivation in the world, an order that could not be changed. Even when he cultivated the chaotic body, he needed to break through with the laws of the sword to reach the next level, or his chaotic body would remain stuck at his current level for all of eternity. However, right before him, Han Zong had actually defied the order of the world and ignored the restraint of comprehension, allowing his cultivation to grow. This left Jianchen deeply shocked. At this moment, Han Zong said, "This method to continue cultivating while restrained by comprehension was created by a past senior during the era when we had 9 successors countless years ago. It has been passed down since then. It's the greatest piece of work our martial soul lineage possesses. Moreover, the archives record that during the age of the 9 successors, our martial soul lineage was extremely glorious. We became unprecedentedly powerful, enough to frighten the stars. We were fearless and could even stand up against grand exalts. Stand up against grand exalts? Does that mean that once we have 9 successors, we can give birth to a grand exalt?" Jianchen was deeply stunned. At that moment, he discovered his understanding of the martial soul lineage was nowhere near enough. The martial soul lineage seemed to possess far, far too many secrets hidden from the world. Han Zong shook his head gently and said, "That age was far too long ago. Even the grand exalt of ancient paths had not heard of the matters back then. Now, our martial soul lineage only possesses a few ancient archives that touch on this matter. We, the juniors, are unable to prove whether any of our seniors had reached that supreme level of cultivation. Enough. Let's talk about this some other time. Let's go in." Han Zong waved at Jianchen before taking the group of people into the cave. Chapter 2463. The Sacred Grounds of the Legacies. There was an extremely wide space within the cave. The space was filled with memorial tablets for the departed. The memorial tablets were crafted from a wondrous type of jade. They were completely snow-white and shone with a faint, white glow. There were countless of them. Jianchen was stunned by all the memorial tablets he saw as soon as he entered the cave. He too became extremely solemn at that moment. He slowly glanced past the memorial tablets and looked at the foreign names on them. For some reason, his heart suddenly became extremely heavy. Deep sorrow filled him. Without any explanation, he already understood that the memorial tablets represented the past seniors of the martial soul lineage. Throughout history, the martial soul lineage had never had more than 9 successors. There were even extremely few times when 8 successors appeared. Most of the time, there would be 5 or 6 of them. Yet, with all the memorial tablets places before him, Jianchen struggled to imagine just how lengthy the martial soul lineage's history was. Han Zong looked at the memorial tablets with a heavy heart and said sternly, "Every single memorial tablet here represents a past senior of our martial soul lineage. The final mark after they die will be left here for the future people to remember. However, these memorial tablets only represent a portion of our past seniors. There were some who died without leaving behind memorial tablets. Our martial soul lineage has encountered many major disasters throughout our lengthy history. Every disaster means that all successors of our martial soul lineage would be killed off, leaving none alive. With everyone dead, there would naturally be no one to create memorial tablets for the fallen seniors. Although many memorial tablets have been added by successors from the next generation, there are still a few seniors who are unknown by others. Naturally, it would be impossible to add their memorial tablets. Some of the memorial tablets here existed in a time in history even more ancient than the current Grand Exalts. However, they were protected by the power of the martial soul mountain. As such, despite the passage of so many years, these memorial tablets were never destroyed. They were maintained like they had just been created. All the secret techniques of our martial soul lineage come from these seniors, so these seniors are the masters of every single future junior in our hearts. Hunzong looked at Jian Chen and became extremely stern. He said, "Jian Chen, please pay respects to our masters with us." With that, Hunzong knelt down first and brought his head to the ground to pay his respects to the departed. Chu Jian, Yu Chao, Yun Ziding, Su Qi, Bai Ruffing, and Qin Shan all knelt down one after another as well. Their faces were filled with respect. The cultivation methods that they practiced came from the owners of the memorial tablets, and many precious cultivation resources came from these past seniors as well. As a result, all of them treated these past seniors as their masters. It was the principle of the universe for a disciple to kneel and pay respects to their master. Jian Chen looked at the memorial tablets deeply before kneeling slowly as well to pay his respects to his masters. Not only was he a member of the martial soul lineage, but he was also about to practice the cultivation method and various secret techniques from these past seniors. As a result, he had already accepted these departed masters. It was also at this moment that Jian Chen formally became the 8th successor of the martial soul lineage. He referred to Hunzong and the others as his seniors. The memorial tablets were the masters that they all shared. After paying his respects, Jian Chen was brought to one side of the cave under Hunzang's lead. He entered an obscure tunnel. The tunnel wound around and around, plummeting straight into the ground. After walking for who knows how long, he finally arrived in a huge cavern. The cavern was empty. Only the surrounding walls possessed various simple, engraved diagrams and inscriptions. Every single diagram and every single inscription possessed the bearing of ways. It was as if the profound laws of the world were being invoked. Here is the true core of our martial soul lineage. All our legacies are engraved on the surrounding walls. Every single inscription and every single diagram on the wall presents the cultivation method, battle skills, and various knowledge on cultivation passed down by our seniors. They've used a unique secret technique of our martial soul lineage to condense all the information into a point, forming an imprint of ways that can be passed down from each generation so that the juniors can benefit from. Under the protection of the martial soul mountain's power, these imprint of ways will never vanish regardless of how much time passes. As long as our martial soul mountain remains, these imprints of ways will never vanish. Everlasting imprints. Jian Chen stared at the diagrams and inscriptions on the stone walls as his eyes shone. 8th Junior, many of these imprints contain introductions to martial soul force and the method of use. You need to understand this area of knowledge since it's your first time here. Once you completely understand martial soul force, I'll take you the place where you can collect martial soul rock, Hunzong said to Jian Chen. Martial soul rock? Jian Chen became curious as soon as he heard that. 8th Junior, martial soul rock is a special product of our martial soul mountain. You can't find it anywhere else aside from our martial soul mountain. Martial soul rock is crucial if you want your martial soul force to grow rapidly. However, 8th Junior's current understanding of martial soul force is far too shallow. It's nowhere near enough to use martial soul force, so it's not the time to collect martial soul rock yet. You can only cultivate here for a while first. Qin Shan chuckled from beside Jian Chen. Alright, let's leave first and let 8th Junior cultivate here. Don't worry about the divine hull from the Gloomwater sect for now, 8th Junior. Once you reach a certain level of cultivation with martial soul force, the obstinate artifact spirit will be perfect for you to test your martial soul force on. Hunzong and the others left, leaving Jian Chen alone in the large cavern. As he looked at the ancient imprints engraved in the surroundings of the cavern and sensed the power of ways within them, Jian Chen was unable to contain his excitement. Being unable to strengthen and cultivate martial soul force had once been his greatest pity. Now, he had finally come to the sacred grounds that held the legacies for martial soul force. He was extremely excited over the fact that he could unconditionally view the many legacies of martial soul force. With a deep breath, Jian Chen slowly calmed himself down. After a while of hesitance, he sat down in the center of the cavern and began to observe the ancient diagrams and inscriptions on the walls. Han Zong had already explained to Jian Chen in detail which regions were cultivation methods, which regions were secret techniques, and which regions were the notes on cultivation left behind by past seniors. Jian Chen's current usage and knowledge of martial soul force remained at a rudimentary level. As a matter of fact, he did not even possess a rudimentary grasp over it, so the inscriptions he looked at first explained how to gain a basic grasp of martial soul force. The ancient inscriptions that detailed the basic knowledge of martial soul force gradually blurred in his eyes. At that moment, the entire inscription seemed to become a space, a world in his eyes. The world contained vast amounts of knowledge and memories. At this moment, the knowledge and memories had turned into a tremendous flood of information that poured into his mind. Chapter 2464, Secret of the Grand Exalt's Cultivation Method. Jian Chen's mind immediately shuddered. He lost all contact with the outside world. He forgot about time, and he forgot about himself as he completely submerged himself in the tremendous flood of information. He did his best to accept and digest it all. The information contained some basic knowledge regarding martial soul force. It explained how to gain a rudimentary grasp over martial soul force in great detail. Jian Chen had never come in contact with this knowledge before. After all, he had been cultivating for too short of a time. He spent most of this time on comprehending other laws and rarely ever placed any efforts on martial soul force. As a result, his understanding of martial soul force could be described as just touching on the surface. As a matter of fact, touching on the surface would be an exaggeration. Now that he had obtained a large amount of knowledge regarding martial soul force in the sacred grounds of the Martial Soul Mountain, he immediately felt enlightened. His understanding and knowledge of martial soul force deepened. So this is martial soul force. 3 days later, Jian Chen opened his eyes. He had absorbed all the information recorded within the first inscription that he saw. Now, he had finally gained a proper understanding of martial soul force. Turns out the martial soul force I used before isn't actual martial soul force. Actual martial soul force requires a further step of refinement from the original basics. Only after refinement can it truly be called martial soul force. Its power will become even greater, Jian Chen thought. Then he looked at a second inscription and focused on it. He knew what he needed to do right now, and it was not to advance his martial soul force. He needed to use this opportunity to absorb some knowledge instead. Whether it be the cultivation methods, secret techniques, or the notes on cultivation left behind by people of the past, he needed to understand it now. This was because these legacies could only be obtained from the Martial Soul Mountain. They could not be taken away. For the next period of time, Jian Chen remained within the sacred grounds of the Martial Soul Mountain, absorbing the information in each imprint. Not only did he obtain many cultivation methods from the imprints, but he also learned some secret techniques and abilities. Some cultivation methods were more powerful than the others. The only thing that dissatisfied Jian Chen was that all the cultivation methods could only be used to cultivate to peak chaotic prime. Members of the martial soul lineage can never break through to grand prime. Their highest level of cultivation is peak chaotic primes. Since no one has ever reached Grand Prime, there naturally wouldn't be a cultivation method that leads to Grand Prime. Although 9 successors have once appeared in the history of the martial soul lineage, and they came up with a method to bypass the limits of comprehension required to reach Grand Prime, that's only cultivation. Their comprehension and martial soul force did not reach a breakthrough. The chaotic body I cultivate should be equivalent to Grand Prime once I reach great perfection. No one has ever managed to reach great perfection with the chaotic body. In other words, cultivators of the chaotic body can never become immortal exalts. That's the same with the martial soul force that I cultivate. Is there some connection between the two? Jianchen frowned and sank into his thoughts. Members of the martial soul lineage can't even reach Grand Prime, but the hallowed Saint Masters from the Radiant Saint Hall can become Grand Exalts. Once the Radiant Saint Hall gains a Grand Exalt, how will it be possible for the martial soul lineage to survive? That is simply too unfair. However, the Grand Exalt's cultivation method from the Tower of Radiance is with me. I wonder if I can find the reason why members of the martial soul lineage can't break through to Grand Prime through the method of the Exalted Saint? Jianchen thought. He immediately closed his eyes when he thought of that. The method of the Exalted Saint had been siphoned from the Grand Exalt's legacy imprint by Jianchen. The imprint not only contained the cultivation method, but it also had many ancient abilities and secret techniques. However, with Gongsun Ji's appearance as the Grand Exalt's descendant, Jianchen failed to obtain the entire legacy. As a result, all the abilities and secret techniques went to Gongsun Ji in the end. The method of the Exalted Saint had been sealed up in the depths of Jianchen's sea of consciousness as a ball of memories. Jianchen's consciousness immediately entered the ball of memories and began absorbing the information there. Immediately, the ball of memories containing the method of the Exalted Saint shrank at a visible rate. The method of cultivation gradually became embedded in Jianchen's head. However, as Jianchen rapidly deepened his understanding of the method of the Exalt Saint, his face gradually became strange. The strangeness turned to shock very soon. The method of the Exalt Saint is actually a cultivation method for martial soul force. How is this possible? Jianchen no longer bothered to absorb the memories of the method of the Exalted Saint and suddenly opened his eyes. Shock filled his face as he faced emotional upheaval. The method of the Exalted Saint was actually a cultivation method for martial soul force. This result completely overturned Jianchen's understanding of the Radiant Saint Hall. Was the Grand Exalt who appeared in the history of the Radiant Saint Hall actually a member of the martial soul lineage? At that moment, Jianchen felt his head descend into a mess. There were far too many things that he did not understand. Members of the martial soul lineage could never become Grand Primes. Since the Grand Exalt who appeared in the Radiant Saint Hall's history was a member of the martial soul lineage, how did he become a Grand Exalt? Moreover, the Grand Exalt did not appear in the same age as when 9 successors appeared for the martial soul lineage mentioned by Hunzong. There were many details that showed they were from different times. Since the Radiant Saint Hall's past Grand Exalt was a member of the martial soul lineage, why are the Radiant Saint Hall enemies with the martial soul lineage? Moreover, looking at the cultivation method, breaking through to Grand Prime doesn't seem as difficult as it sounds. Since that's the case, why aren't members of the martial soul lineage able to reach Grand Prime? It can't just be because of cultivation methods. The martial soul lineage had so many outstanding seniors in its history. They even experienced a glorious age when 9 successors appeared at the same time, and the lineage's fortune reached a maximum. No matter how difficult it is, no matter how profound it is, a cultivation method should have been created a long time ago. Or maybe there are other reasons why the martial soul lineage can never reach Grand Prime. If that is really the case, doesn't that mean that even if I have the Grand Exalt's cultivation method, I won't be able to overcome this problem? With those doubts, Jianchen left the sacred grounds and went to find Hunzong. 8th Junior, you're not in the sacred grounds, and you've come to my place instead. Have you encountered any problems in cultivation? Hunzong smiled amiably as soon as he saw Jianchen. On the current martial soul mountain, Hunzong possessed the greatest seniority. He was the first senior brother of the martial soul lineage. After him were Chu Jian and Yu Chao. Jianchen was the youngest in terms of seniority. First senior brother, there's something that I don't understand. Is it due to cultivation methods that members of our martial soul lineage can never break through to Grand Prime? Hunzong shook his head and replied, if it was because of cultivation methods, even I, at my current level of cultivation, would only need a little time to come up with a new cultivation method, let alone the countless seniors with deviant-like talent throughout the history of our martial soul lineage. Something else prevents us from breaking through. Chapter 2465. Fang Jing, then what is preventing our breakthrough? Jianchen asked. This matter related to his future, so he clearly cared about it very much. Han Zhang's expression became rather mixed. After a soft sigh, he stood up and arrived at the edge of the cliff 100 meters away. He stood there with his hands behind his back, looking at the sea of stars beyond the martial Soul Mountain. After a moment of silence, he said, "The thing preventing us from breaking through to Grand Prime are the laws that this world operates under, in other words, the laws of the world." The laws of the world? Jianchen was at a loss. Clearly, this had caught him by surprise. That's right, it's the supreme laws of the world. The restrictions of the laws left our past seniors helpless. That's because whenever you try to break through under the restrictions, there's a hidden, mysterious, and terrifying power that suppresses the whole process. Before the power, no matter how powerful you are, you won't be able to resist. Han Zhang's face was filled with deep fear. The hidden power is beyond all of our imaginations. Even with my current level of strength, I feel even more insignificant than an ant before it. Jianchen's interest was piqued. Han Zhang's description made him think of how Saint Emperors could not reach the origin realm back on the Tianyuan continent. Although the Tianyuan continent had lost its origin energy due to the Yin-Yang Saint Rock back then, there was still a chance for some talented prodigies to reach the origin realm. For example, the Path Lord of Carnal Desires. In reality, the reason why Saint Emperors could not break through was not just because of origin energy. There was another extremely important reason, and that was the formation that Protector Shui had cast down on the lower world. It was the formation that prevented all Saint Emperors from reaching the origin realm. Forceful breakthroughs like what the Path Lord of Carnal Desires attempted would result in death. Did the martial soul lineage suffer from something similar? Did some supreme figure use a curse to change the laws of the world against our martial soul lineage? Jianchen asked carefully. Sovereigns of the world were existences who had become a part of the ways. They represented the heavenly ways. It would not be difficult for such an expert to do something along the lines of preventing people from breaking through. Han Zhang shook his head. Many of our past seniors have considered this possibility. Our previous generation even managed to get a hold of senior ancient paths of the 7 Grand Exalts in hopes of finding a way to overcome this. However, in the end, even the knowledgeable, wise senior ancient paths discovered nothing. Some past seniors even tried breaking through before senior ancient paths, but even senior ancient paths failed to sense the mysterious power preventing our breakthrough. Jianchen was shocked. The Grand Exalt of ancient paths was an existence who had become part of the ways. They could use their will to interfere with the order of the world, making them a true sovereign of the world. However, even someone as terrifying as that was unable to do anything. This left Jianchen utterly shocked. At the same time, Jianchen understood that something unknown must have happened after the Radiant Saint Hall's Grand Exalt passed away, preventing members of the martial soul lineage from breaking through to Grand Prime. Jianchen was absolutely certain that the Grand Exalt, the master of the Tower of Radiance, was a member of the martial soul lineage from the method of the Exalted Saint. After thinking it over, Jianchen realized that he was in no hurry to tell Han Zhang about the secret regarding the method of the Exalted Saint, as the matter was just too shocking. He needed to spend some time considering whether he should disclose the information or not. It's just a pity that I can't pass on the cultivation method, or I would be able to leave a part of it here, Jianchen thought. A Grand Exalt's cultivation method touched on the deepest truths of the world. The entire cultivation method had not been recorded with words. Instead, it was a memory, a thought. He could not leave behind the cultivation method with his current strength. In reality, some legacies that belonged to Grand Primes or even Chaotic Primes had already deviated from recordings of words. They were either thoughts, inscriptions of various shapes, or diagrams that could be passed on and inherited. They all touched on the secrets of the ways in the world. It was impossible to achieve without a certain level of cultivation. Jian Chen bid farewell to Hunzong before returning to the sacred grounds by himself. This time, since he already had the Grand Exalt's cultivation method, he no longer looked at the cultivation methods. He directly looked at the notes on cultivation and the various abilities and secret techniques. These notes on cultivation have enlightened me. I never had any experience with cultivating martial soul force, but my knowledge has increased quite a lot after viewing their notes on cultivation. Jian Chen completely forgot about everything else as he remained in the sacred grounds alone. He greedily absorbed the various comprehensions and notes on cultivation left behind by past seniors. At the same time, a young lady sat on the ground as she cultivated in a small city on the distant aquaplane. She held several mid-grade divine crystals in her hands. As she cultivated, the energy within the mid-grade divine crystals would constantly pour into her body, strengthening her cultivation at all times. Clearly, the young lady's talent was extremely great. Even though she was only a saint ruler, her rate of absorption matched or even surpassed some origin realm experts. As a result, the young lady's cultivation grew rapidly as she used the divine crystals. It was astonishing. She was Fang Jing. Back then, under Jian Chen's assistance, not only did Fang Jinger's grandfather completely recover from his wounds, but his cultivation increased drastically as well. As soon as he roused, he left the Scarlet Water City with Fang Jinger and settled down in a smaller city. Fang Jinger did not continue to sell maps outside either. Instead, she used the resources Jian Chen had given her to focus on cultivating and increasing her strength. Her rate of growth was unbelievable. She did not encounter any bottlenecks at all when she went from Heaven Saint Master to Saint Ruler. It was basically smooth passage. Now, she was already a 9th heavenly layer Saint Ruler. At this moment, Fang Jinger's presence swelled, and the energy in her body reached a whole new level in an instant. She had broken through again, becoming a Saint King. However, at this moment, her body quivered. In the depths of her mind, a mysterious door seemed to open, and a tremendous amount of memories surged forth. Fang Jinger's presence and even her entire bearing changed silently with the appearance of the memories. She began to resemble herself less and less. After sitting there for 3 days, Fang Jinger opened her eyes. The moment her eyes snapped open, an invisible pressure appeared. Extremely profound truths of ways shot out from her eyes, causing the space before her to tremble violently. At the same time, the small wooden hut she used for cultivation crumbled to dust and dispersed in the wind. Immediately, Fang Jinger was exposed to the outside world. Fortunately, she stayed in an extremely remote region of the small city. There was no one around, so she failed to raise anyone's attention. I've finally awakened. I'm Fang Jing, the elder princess of the heavenly palace of great radiance. I never thought that I would actually come to the saints' world. Fang Jinger stood up slowly. Her gaze was extremely deep, as if a whole universe evolved in them. They were filled with the truths of the ways. Chapter 2466. Dealing with the artifact spirit. Next, she glanced at her body with a mixed gaze. After a while of thought, she looked at the wooden hut that had disintegrated because of her. She began to hesitate. Although you're from the saints' world, I'm unable to achieve heartlessness. Whatever, Fang Jing murmured. She hovered across the ground and extended a slender finger gently. With that gesture, the space before her rippled like a pebble had been tossed into a lake. In the next moment, a mysterious power appeared out of nowhere, and the small, wooden hut that had disintegrated actually condensed back together in its original position. In a split second, the wooden hut returned to its previous state. It seemed no different. Fang Jing entered the wooden hut. She clenched her hand gently, and the origin energy in the surroundings gathered, condensing into a paper and pen in her hand. Fang Jing left behind a message on a piece of paper in the wooden hut before leaving without any reluctance. As soon as she stepped out, she vanished. There were no pulses of energy, no power of laws, and no ripples in space. Fang Jing just vanished into thin air like that, leaving no traces behind. The Red Flame sect was a rather renowned sect on the Aquaplane because they possessed 3 infinite primes. They ruled over a region on the Aquaplane. The demonic Orchid Mountains was a place that the Red Flame sect placed great importance on. Not only was the entire place protected by formations cast down by the Red Flame sect, but there were even several God King elders stationed in the mountains all year round. This was because a high-grade divine crystal mine existed beneath the demonic Orchid Mountains. Disciples of the Red Flame sect would collect the divine crystals day and night, providing a large quantity of divine crystals to the Red Flame sect. It had already become one of their avenues of wealth. On this day, a young lady arrived outside the demonic Orchid Mountains. She had come silently, hovering above the ground. She stopped outside the demonic Orchid Mountains and stared at the protective formations before her silently. None of the godhood experts in the mountains sensed her arrival, including the God King elders. She was Fong Jing. However, whether it be Fong Jing's deep gaze or her unfamiliar and cold bearing, all of it made her seem like a completely different person from before. If it were not for the fact that her appearance remained the same, she really could be misidentified as a different person. Suddenly, Fong Jing began to form a set of hand seals. As she formed them one after another, her body gradually faded. In the end, she turned into a gust of wind and floated towards the demonic Orchid Mountains steadily. The gust of wind directly approached the protective formation around the demonic Orchid Mountains. However, the formation personally cast down by the ancestors of the Red Flame sect that could stop even infinite primes seemed completely non-existent before Fong Jing. They were completely useless. Fong Jing passed through the formation smoothly without setting it off, entering the demonic Orchid Mountains. It's time to hand up your harvest. Everyone, hand over the divine crystals you've mined. The sect will reward you with merit depending on the amount and grade of the divine crystals you hand up. A god called out loudly outside a tunnel in the demonic Orchid Mountains. Bare-chested, burly cultivators emerged from the tunnel in a straight line. They all handed over the space rings that were especially used to hold divine crystals. Nearby, there were two overgod disciples of the Red Flame sect who enveloped the surroundings with the powerful senses of their souls. They watched over everything to prevent anyone from taking divine crystals for themselves. These miners were not disciples of the Red Flame sect. Instead, they had been recruited by the sect for extremely low prices or were slaves that they had captured from various places. They focused on mining the divine crystals. There's still half a month before we have to hand over these divine crystals to the sect. However, we've managed to collect far more divine crystals in the past year compared to other years. It looks like we can complete the sect's mission with more than the quota. Once we exceed the quota, the sect should reward us with quite a lot. The two overgod disciples stood with their arms crossed on a rock as they conversed leisurely. At this moment, a gust of wind blew over. It ruffled their clothes and made their hair dance. However, they did not care about it at all. This was because gusts of wind would blow past constantly in the demonic Orchid Mountains. They had already adapted to it. However, the gust of wind directly approached the tunnel after passing the two overgod disciples. Miners constantly walked out from the tunnel. All of them sensed the gust of wind, but no one paid attention to it. In the end, the gust of wind directly reached the very depths of the mine. The wind condensed and turned into a young lady. She was Fong Jing. This high-grade divine crystal mine should allow me to recover quite a lot of strength. Fong Jing studied the surroundings, and with a thought, the power of laws immediately descended. It crushed the rocks, causing many of them to fall down and block the passageway. Fong Jing sat down and began to cultivate. She directly absorbed the energy in the high-grade divine crystal mine. Her absorption of energy was an extremely shocking sight. Endless, pure energy condensed into visible streams of light and gathered in from all directions. As more and more light appeared, it gradually formed a huge cocoon that wrapped around Fong Jing. The huge cocoon was completely condensed from pure energy. Inside the cocoon, Fong Jing swallowed the energy like a whale, refining it within her. It allowed her strength to grow rapidly. It was terrifying and shocking. In the blink of an eye, 3 years passed. Jian Chen had used these 3 years to view all the notes left by people of the past in the sacred grounds of the Martial Soul Mountain. Although he had not cultivated martial soul force for a long time, he possessed rich knowledge and experience from what the past seniors had left behind. It allowed his understanding of martial soul force to reach a whole new level. Across the saints' world and even the immortals' world, only the successors of the martial soul lineage could enjoy such great fortune. This was because all the legacy imprints outside were not eternal. Whenever they were used, the power within the legacy imprint would decrease. Once it completely ran out, the legacy imprint would become useless. Due to the protection and replenishment from the mysterious power of the martial soul mountain, all the legacy imprints there were truly everlasting. Their power would never run out. Martial soul force can bypass all obstructions and directly attack the artifact spirits of God artifacts. I only learned that martial soul force possesses such a property now. Jian-Chen arrived in an open area on the martial soul mountain after leaving the sacred grounds. The medium-quality God artifact Divine Hall from the Gloomwater sect happened to be placed there. Han Zong and the others did not pay any attention to it after bringing it back. Although the artifact spirit could control the Divine Hall, it had lost the ability to escape after it was brought to the martial soul mountain. This was because the power of the martial soul mountain was greater than the artifact spirit. The artifact spirit was unable to escape from the range of the martial soul mountain with its abilities alone. Jian-Chen, don't even think about making me yield and accepting you as my master. It will never happen. The artifact spirit of the Divine Hall held great resentment towards Jian-Chen. He immediately called out when he saw Jian-Chen. Jian-Chen was completely unaffected by those words. He arrived before the Divine Hall, and a black light suddenly flashed through his eyes. A strand of martial soul force directly shot out and attacked the Divine Hall. Martial soul force could bypass the defenses of the Divine Hall, easily breaking through. Like a sharp sword, it directly struck the artifact spirit's body. Chapter 2467, Martial Soul Rock. Although Jian-Chen's strength did not rise at all during the time he spent within the sacred grounds, his understanding of martial soul force had advanced to a completely new level. Moreover, he had finally learnt the true way of using martial soul force. As a result, even though his current martial soul force remained at the same level as before, its power was on a completely different level. It had become far, far stronger. After sending out the strand of martial soul force, Jian-Chen stared straight at the Divine Hall before him. He wanted to see the effects. What's this? Martial soul force? It's actually the stuff of legends, martial soul force? You call this martial soul force? Jian-Chen, your martial soul force isn't even enough to scratch an itch of mine. If you want to harm me with your martial soul force, you're dreaming. The artifact spirit laughed aloud. He scoffed, Come again. Continue. Look at how you pose no threat to me with your current strength. Jian-Chen was not angered at all. Instead, he smiled faintly. He knew that his martial soul force was still very weak, nowhere near strong enough to harm the artifact spirit of a medium-quality God artifact. His main purpose of coming here was to test whether martial soul force could bypass the defenses of the God artifact and directly reach the artifact spirit like what the legacy imprints mentioned. From what it seemed right now, martial soul force did not disappoint him. This was a joyous matter for him. This was because if his opponents in the future possessed a God artifact, it would drastically increase their strength. Once his martial soul force was powerful enough, he would be able to reduce the advantages brought on by the God artifact. 8th Junior, you should probably strengthen your martial soul force. If you can reach my level of martial soul force, you'll be able to toy around with the artifact spirit of the Divine Hall properly. Qing Shan walked over from afar and smiled mysteriously as he stared at the Divine Hall. Just like this, Qing Shan said softly. In the next moment, Jian-Chen immediately sensed powerful martial soul force shoot out from between Qing Shan's eyes, stabbing straight into the Divine Hall. Immediately, the entire Divine Hall shuddered gently. The artifact spirit cried out, If you have the courage, come fight me in here. What skills do you have by launching sneak attacks with martial soul force outside? I can make him suffer with just a casual strike of mine. The artifact spirit isn't particularly powerful. But that does make sense. Although he's a medium-quality god artifact, he's one of the weaker medium-quality god artifacts, Qing Shan said indifferently. I need to properly strengthen my martial soul force, said Jianchen. The divine hall before him contained the tremendous resources of the Gloomwater sect, as well as over 10 droplets of hell water. He was eager to make the artifact spirit yield. Once the artifact spirit yielded, he would be able to take whatever he wanted from the divine hall. However, the artifact spirit was just too stubborn, unwilling to accept him. Right now, he did not have the ability to forcefully subdue a medium-quality god artifact either. Although the chaotic primes of the martial soul lineage could achieve that, Jianchen did not want help from others. He needed to subdue the god artifact himself. Let's go. I'll take you to the place where you collect martial soul rock. Martial soul rock is crucial for strengthening your martial soul force. Qing Shan led Jianchen away. Before long, Qing Shan had brought Jianchen to a cave. The cave was very deep. There were signs of digging in the surroundings. It seemed more like a mine. Very soon, Jianchen reached the very depths of the cave under Qing Shan's lead. There was an extremely large, circular room there. The surrounding walls were covered with dazzling, violet crystals. They shone with blinding light. This is martial soul rock. Only our martial soul mountain produces martial soul rock across the entire Saints world. All members of our martial soul lineage rely on martial soul rock to increase our strength. That's because martial soul rock holds pure martial soul force. Not only will absorbing the martial soul force in the rocks allow our own martial soul force to grow, but it can also recover martial soul force. Condensing martial soul force without the martial soul rocks will lead to extremely slow progress. Qing Shan looked at the violet crystals in the rock and explained to Jianchen in detail. Martial soul rock is extremely special. When it's fused with the martial soul mountain, its martial soul force won't decrease, but once it has been collected, the martial soul force inside will rapidly drain away and return to the martial soul mountain. As a result, martial soul rocks cannot be stored indefinitely like divine crystals. Once they're mined, it's best if you absorb as much of the martial soul force in there as possible before it all leaks away. Isn't there a way to take away the martial soul rock? Jianchen asked. Qing Shan shook his head. There's none. Martial soul rock cannot be taken away because once it leaves the martial soul mountain, all the martial soul force inside will leak away and return to the martial soul mountain. As a result, you have to absorb the martial soul rocks here. Afterwards, Qing Shan told Jianchen about aspects he needed to be aware of before patting his shoulder and saying, 8th Junior, just cultivate here in peace. If there's anywhere that confuses you, you can ask your seniors. Qing Shan left the cave, and Jianchen arrived before the stone wall. He condensed sword qi at the tip of his finger and stabbed it into the wall, collecting the martial soul rock. Martial soul rock was not difficult to collect. Very soon, a fist-sized piece of violet crystal fell onto the ground. Jianchen picked up the violet crystal and sensed it quietly. As expected, there was extremely pure martial soul force within the violet crystal. However, it all leaked away at an extremely vigorous rate. At this rate, all the martial soul force inside the martial soul rock would be gone in less than half a day, having all returned to the martial soul mountain. Jianchen did not absorb it immediately. Instead, he came up with all sorts of methods to try and stop the flow. But in the end, he was unable to stop the leakage of martial soul force. He just watched the martial soul rock disappear from his hands. It really can't be stored for long periods of time. I can't take it away. Jianchen sighed inside and gave up on the idea of collecting some martial soul rock. He chipped off another piece and sat down on the ground to cultivate. The martial soul force in the rock turned into a thin strand of energy that trickled into Jianchen's forehead. Jianchen used the method of the Exalted Saint and formally began to practice the Grand Exalt's cultivation method. The cultivation methods of Grand Exalts were formally recognized as the supreme legacies in the world. They took from the fortunes of the world and contained the secrets of the ways. They were extremely profound, and their efficacy went without saying. As he practiced cultivation method, The trickle of energy from the Martial Soul Rock immediately widened several times. The flow of Martial Soul Force from the Martial Soul Rock immediately rose, becoming a stream of energy connected to Jian Chen's forehead. At that moment, Jian Chen's absorption rate of Martial Soul Force rapidly increased. Chapter 2468. Fang Jing's strength. The shining Martial Soul Rock rapidly dimmed in Jian Chen's hands. The Martial Soul Force within it flowed away quickly. However, Jian Chen's Martial Soul Force grew at a rate that astonished him. It was so fast that it surprised Jian Chen and filled him with joy. In just 4 hours, all the energy within the Martial Soul Rock became depleted. Jian Chen also opened his eyes at that moment, rousing from his joyful cultivation. I probably can only absorb half of the Martial Soul Force within a Martial Soul Rock. The rest would have dispersed into the surroundings and returned to the Martial Soul Mountain. But even if I can only absorb half, that's enough to bring an evident increase for me, Jian Chen murmured as his eyes shone. In just 4 hours, my Martial Soul Force has increased by an extremely evident amount. If I cultivate here for a few more years, or even longer, I wonder what level my Martial Soul Force will reach. Moreover, as my Martial Soul Force rapidly strengthens, my absorption rate will become greater and greater. Jian Chen was excited for the future. He continued to submerge himself in cultivation. Time passed silently. Unknowingly, Jian Chen had already been cultivating in the cave for over half a year. He had collected over 1,000 fist-sized Martial Soul Rocks during this time. His Martial Soul Force increased at an extremely rapid rate. It had reached godhood with the help of the Martial Soul Rock. All of this happened in a little over half a year. He still had a lot of time ahead of him. My Radiant Saint Force increases with my Martial Soul Force. After all, Martial Soul Force is a power that comes from the combination of being a fighter and a Radiant Saint Master. As such, no matter what level one's Martial Soul Force is at, Radiant Saint Force will be at the same level. But that also means that Martial Soul Force will be restricted by the laws of the Hallowed. Are we, the Martial Soul lineage, really unable to comprehend the laws of the Hallowed to Grand Prime? Whatever. I still have an extremely long way to go before I reach the 9th heavenly layer of Infinite Prime. I'll cultivate here in peace for now. Let's deal with the future when it comes. At the same time, a supreme quality saint artifact Divine Hall stood atop of the demonic Orchid Mountains controlled by the Red Flame sect on the distant Aqua Plain. 3 elders of the Red Flame sect resided within the Divine Hall. 2 of them were mid-god kings, while the last one was a late god king. The 3 of them watched over the demonic Orchid Mountains most of the time. They were responsible for its safety. As elders with cultivation at God King, they were supreme figures in the Red Flame sect. The 3 of them obviously lived comfortably since they were stationed here. They cultivated all day and night in seclusion and paid no attention to the matters outside. They rarely ever emerged unless extremely important matters happened. On this day, an overgod disciple of the Red Flame sect ran in a hurry. He reported to the 3 elders in secluded cultivation, Elders, there's bad news, bad news. A large amount of energy has been lost from the high-grade divine crystal mine below the demonic Orchid Mountains. The divine crystals that were supposed to be high-grade have all dropped to mid-grade. There's not a single high-grade divine crystal left in the entire mountains. What did you say? An old voice rang out. A white-robed old man appeared before the disciple. He was stern. The high-grade divine crystal mine was the greatest wealth of the Red Flame sect. As a matter of fact, it could be said that the entire sect depended on it, and it had a direct correlation to the sect's future. They could not allow anything to happen to it. A high-grade divine crystal mine has plummeted to mid-grade. How is that possible? 2 other figures appeared from behind the old man. The 3 elders stationed here by the Red Flame sect had all been alarmed. Elders, please go check quickly. More and more energy is being lost from the mine. If this continues, the mid-grade divine crystals will probably drop to low grade, the disciple said frantically. Elder Dong, please go check on this. said the white-robed old man to a mid-god king elder behind him. The god king referred to as Elder Dong nodded before directly leaving the divine hall. The powerful senses of a god king's soul expanded and enveloped the entire mountain range. It even penetrated the ground. Energy really is leaking away rapidly from the divine crystal mine. However, all the energy is gathering towards one location. Elder Dong found the source of everything very quickly with his senses of the soul. With a single movement, he charged into a tunnel. In a few seconds, he arrived at the very depths of the tunnel. He stopped before a stone wall that was as smooth as a mirror. Elder Dong stared at the stone wall for a while before bellowing out, "There's actually a concealing formation. Which thief is bold enough to rob the divine crystal mine of our red flame sect?" Elder Dong held a sword and directly swung out with it. Boom! With a loud sound, the concealing formation ahead of him exploded loudly. Shattered rock flew everywhere and exposed what was happening inside. A beautiful lady who seemed to be 18 sat on the ground cultivating in extremely cheap, coarse clothes. Pure energy gathered in from all directions, forming a dense layer of mist around her. The mist obscured the lady from time to time such that she seemed rather otherworldly. She seemed like an immortal in the mist. She was Fong Jing. "Who are you? Don't you know that the demonic Orchid Mountains is the territory of our Red Flame sect? State your origins, or don't blame me for being impolite." Elder Dong stared at Fong Jing with a sunken face. Even though he managed to tell with a single glance that she was only a peak god, he did not dare to be reckless. The scene of Fong Jing gathering energy was just too shocking to him. She was only a god, yet she could manipulate all the energy within the mine. At the same time, she absorbed the energy so quickly that even he, a mid-god king, was left amazed. This all pointed to the fact that the lady definitely was not a simple person. Fong Jing remained there with her eyes closed. She said gently, "You're a mere 9 heavenly Xian immortal, yet you dare to show such disrespect to me?" With that, great power of laws descended, forming a huge pressure that crushed down on Elder Dong. Elder Dong's face suddenly changed. He was utterly shocked. To him, the laws that had suddenly appeared were so powerful that they were like an ocean. He could not resist at all. He felt as tiny as an ant before the laws as a mid-god king, where he could not resist at all. Plop! Elder Dong's knees directly struck the ground, shattering his kneecaps and forming 2 small ditches in the rock below him. He stared at Fong Jing in fright as his forehead became covered with cold sweat. He felt utter fear. He wanted to beg for mercy, but he realized that he could not make any sounds at all. He did not even have the power to speak. "You're a mere 9 heavenly Xian immortal. I would originally be disdained to kill you, but unfortunately, you're a part of the saints' world. Since you're a part of the saints' world, there is only death for you," Fong Jing said as if she stood supreme. It was like she was judging a criminal. She coldly decided on a death sentence for Elder Dong. Bang! Elder Dong's body immediately exploded, filling the air with blood. Elder Dong, a mid-god king, did not even manage to make a sound. He was directly killed off. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.